Victoria. No, seriously, genuinely, the worst Christmas and New Year in the history of the world.
Reason.
In bed, haven't had one drink, didn't see anybody till the third. My wife as well, really, really rotten. And so many people have it. So I'm going to try and get through. Justin Trudeau's going to resign. West Ham are going to sack their manager. Labour are a disgrace. Nigel Farage shouldn't trust Elon Musk as far as he could throw him.
Correct.
And apparently, the DWP has paid out £500 million to dead people. I've got a personal story on this. The old man who died, he had to give the money back.
Unbelievable. Awesome. Well, so sorry, Jeremy Carl.
Thank you.
On the other side of the news at 4 o'clock. We're back tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock. Headlines coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon, just after 4 o'clock, and a Happy New Year to you. JK back on drive for 2025. That rhymed. If you didn't hear the handover with Ian, I spent 3 weeks with the worst flu ever. I've only just got my voice back, which has hacked off a lot of people, let's be perfectly honest. Many people were hoping I never recovered. But I'm back, but I'm going to be speaking quite gently. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in. Thank you to Ian. Back tomorrow afternoon from 1. If you want to be part of the debate in the next 3 hours on Drive, the home of free speech and common sense talk, so 344 499 1000, text to 87222. Start your message with the word talk. Right now, outside his residence in Ottawa, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, we believe, is resigning just before Trump arrives on the scene. The woke Liberals running off into the distance, but we'll let you know more about that as it happens. You'll have heard, and I guess most of the day on the show people will have been talking about it, the fallout between Elon Musk, who, when I left here a few weeks ago, was going to give £100 million to Nigel Farage, over the weekend said he wasn't fit to lead and Reform should look for a new leader. He's been slapped down by several of Farage's friends and, in fact, by Sir Keir Starmer, although I think he's got bigger problems. You might have heard the other news stories today. There's so many. I mean, honestly, the latest one which, I mean, just sends me, but I'm not going to shout. Labour has opened the door, my friends, to scrapping prescriptions for over 60s, free prescriptions. So to put it in a nutshell, if you're over 60, if they don't freeze you to bleeding death, the Labour Party, they want you to die of an illness that you won't be able to afford to buy a prescription for. What are they thinking? So much to talk about. Foreign criminals more likely to be arrested for sexual offences, which would beg the suggestion, why don't you close the bloody borders so we have less of them here? And just to prove how completely inefficient any government is, not just Labour, but the past government, the DWP, which is the Department of Work and Pensions, has, it's been said here, in the last few years, paid out £500 million pounds, I should say, to people who are dead. I have personal experience with this story because they paid it to my old man, about £1,400. I sadly did the right thing and paid it back. I'm only joking, it was the right thing to do. But that's an absolutely true story. What do you make of those stories, my friends, as we head into 2025? 0344 499 1000, text to 87222. Start your message with the word talk. The A-team are back. Ryan is back. He spent 2 weeks in Liverpool with his wife's family. He said it was fun. I asked him what he got for Christmas. He said oven gloves, because that's what I wanted. That sums it all up. Jodie's back, slightly hacked off. She didn't get a wedding ring or an engagement ring, but she had quite a lot of fun, apparently. And Amy is here. Who's on the other bit? What's his name? Titus. Some ex-wrestlers doing the bits. Anyway, it's all going on. 0344 499 1000. Let's kick off as we... Oh, he has just announced it. Justin Trudeau has announced he is stepping down as Canadian Prime Minister. That is official. You heard it here on Talk. Justin Trudeau has just announced he's stepping down. We're not sure yet about the timescale. Let's bring in our first guest this afternoon. Delighted to say Happy New Year to Ben Habib, former MEP and Brexiteer. My friend, how are you?
Good afternoon, Jeremy. Happy New Year. Glad that you're back.
I am, but the voice is not great, so this is all on you, Mr. Habib. Actually, really appreciate. Hope you had a good time. Let's start briefly with Trudeau standing outside his Rideau cottage there in Ottawa, announcing that he's stepping down. The thing you would think in your head is the woke Liberals doing a runner before Trump takes over the world, right?
Yeah, I think his coalition was falling apart for a while, wasn't it? And we've seen this coming down the track. And all I can say is I'm delighted he's gone. You know, he is one of the best examples of the worst form of wokeism that he has allowed Canada to be gripped by. Multiculturalism, DEI, net zero, locking Canada down with impunity during, you know, the COVID pandemic, or everything you can think of that is damaging for any Western country. He's done it in spades. So I'm absolutely delighted to see the back of him. And I hope that Canada follows a path similar to the one being followed right across, it seems now, Western civilization, where people are waking up and saying, no, we want borders enforced, we want regulations cut, we want taxes down, we want to ditch net zero, we want cultural integration, we want to be proud of our history, etc., etc., etc. And I hope that agenda gets embedded firmly in all Western countries now as we begin to see the back of these people.
It's really interesting, isn't it? We're watching, if you're watching on screen, you'll see pictures of Justin Trudeau there outside Rideau Cottage in Ottawa, attending his resignation in front of the Canadian people. As I say, we'll let you know the timescale of that. But Ben, the irony of what you just said is that as Europe, and in fact, the world is waking up to the reality that wokeism is ridiculous and that we need to have secure borders and a strong military and we need to have strong leadership and law and order. The only goddamn country, it seems, in Europe and the world that's gone to the left is the United Kingdom, for goodness sake, right? The irony.
The irony, but we haven't gone to the left. I'd say we were one of the first countries to wake up to what was required, and the British people expressed it in 2016 with the vote to leave the EU, which was equivalent to all the things that I've just described. Leaving the EU was a prerequisite for all the steps that are required to be taken to protect and promote our country. And the result of the election, actually, I know, is a result of the despondency of the British people having voted repeatedly for the agenda that Trump is now hopefully going to deliver for America. Having voted for that agenda repeatedly and not seeing it being implemented, people stayed at home. people didn't vote. The turnout was down to 59.5%. Labour got its stonking majority with fewer votes in 2024 than Corbyn lost the election with in 2019. It's because the voter is just fed up. And of course, Reform UK took 4 million votes, which might otherwise have gone to the Conservatives, but it wouldn't have been good to put another Conservative back into office, another Conservative administration, because they needed a firm kicking. They'd become the Labour Party themselves, the uniparty. So, there are good electoral reasons why we've got Labour, but I don't think it in any way represents the will and wishes of the British people.
Seamless you are, and I think you should host this afternoon, or just nod and try and look intelligent. You talked about Reform there, getting 4 million votes, but only 5 seats. You, of course, famously, some months ago, walked away from Reform whilst wishing them the very best of luck. We heard before Christmas quite a lot about how Elon Musk suddenly was going to be in charge, the czar of efficiency, when Donald Trump becomes president for the second time on January the 20th in the United States. Then he started getting involved on X with a lot of things to do with the United Kingdom. There was that meeting at Mar-a-Lago with Farage, Nick Candy, the new billionaire treasurer, and, of course, Elon Musk. There was talk of him making a huge donation. Over the weekend, you wake up and you hear that Elon Musk says, and I quote, Reform needs a new leader. He's not up to it. Farage, blindsiding so many people. He's been called every name under the sun. I'd love your take on this afternoon, Ben Habib.
So it's no secret that, Reform UK and myself have had our differences, and they resulted in me severing my ties with the party on the 28th of November. And at the core of my differences with Nigel Farage and the party is that the party is 60% owned by Nigel. He has de facto full control of the party. It's not democratized. There are no checks and balances in place that could give rise to a party, in my view, that could form a government. And that was at the heart of my complaints about Reform UK. And notwithstanding all the promises made by Nigel and his chairman, Zair Youssef, nothing's happened. It's still owned by Nigel. It's still effectively Nigel's show. And I think that's unsustainable. But there are also other things that have been creeping in. If you look very closely at what Nigel's been up to, what Reform's been up to, it's been pivoting towards what I would call the central ground, which is where we don't need it. We've already got the Liberal Democrats, the Labour Party, and the Conservative Party occupying that central ground. It's very overcrowded. What we want is a party that stands unashamedly for British national interests. And so it's been slightly dismaying. Viewers won't know this, but many of the grassroots who helped Richard Tice and myself put Reform UK on the map have been set aside, disavowed, and others taken into the party. Lots of Tory councillors have been recruited. Former Tory MPs are being taken on board. These are the people who had a hand in delivering the country into the difficulties in which we now find it. So the direction of travel for Reform hasn't been to my liking. And I think what Elon Musk saw, now remember, Elon Musk is someone who is desirous, recognises the need to shift the Overton window dramatically so that the way the Western world is governed similarly changes. And I think what he's realised is that Nigel isn't really on for shifting the Overton window a lot. And the dispute blew up over the what Elon Musk described as the political incarceration of Tommy Robinson. And Nigel said he would go to the US and explain to Elon Musk that actually Tommy Robinson was in contempt of court, and that's a criminal activity and his incarceration is justified. But actually, I'm completely with Elon Musk. I think Tommy Robinson shouldn't be in jail. It was a civil action. It was a defamation case that was made against Tommy. No one typically goes to jail as a result of a civil action. You might have to pay a fine or a penalty or a settlement for the defamation caused, but you shouldn't be incarcerated. And what Tommy Robinson did was break an injunction where he showed a film. I think it's called Silence. He showed a film which he had been prohibited from showing. And the Attorney General, and remember, the Attorney General is a political appointment. It's a Labour Party individual who holds that office since the Labour Party was elected, decided he was going to intervene and bring the contempt charge against Tommy Robinson. And the bar for the Attorney General to make such a decision is a high one. He shouldn't interfere in the legal process unless he thinks it's a matter of important public interest. And then so it was a politically motivated case. No doubt about it, against Tommy Robinson. And then, of course, the judge decided to incarcerate him, which, again, seems disproportionate for showing a film. You shouldn't be sent to jail for, minimum 9 months for showing a film.
Do you think, in terms of the British public, in terms of this nation, you make a really salient point about how Johnson sort of went left and Starmer sort of went right, and UKIP as it was, and the Brexit Party, which has sort of morphed into Reform, was that right-wing organisation that seemingly spoke, as I've said many times on this show, for the sorts of things that me growing up as a Tory voter in a Tory household, we've always talked about.
Yeah, taken for granted.
Absolutely. But do you feel, and it's quite interesting, the sort of desanitise, do you feel that to get elected, I mean, what Trump has done in America with Musk, part of it, is to go so far out on a limb, not be bothered if you're accused, if your criminal charges are thrown against you, if you're found guilty and threatened with jail, if there are bullets fired at you. You have this belief that you want to make this country stand on its own 2 feet and be great again. Do you believe that Elon Musk's response to Nigel was because he saw a lack of strength in that context? But in terms of where Farage is in this country, you would have to say that a lot of people would say, my God, he's the man. He stands up. He says the sorts of things that so many of us want to hear. Does he need to go further to get elected, do you think? Are we not a different place in the States? I don't know. I'm interested.
Well, we are definitely a different political system. They have the presidential system, so one man can be fated and put forward as the solution, and he can say things which, Trump has said many, what we would regard in the United Kingdom as outrageous things, but he said them in order to shift the Overton window. Now, what is critical is that we recognise that we're not going to fix the existential threat, as I call it. The very existence of the United Kingdom, I think, is threatened. It's not a matter of just improving our position. It's a matter of continuing to exist as a country, as I see it. In order to protect our existence, we are going to have to change dramatically the way the country is governed. And that will not be born out of timidity. And the people of this country repeatedly, we opened the discussion, on this point. The people of this country have repeatedly voted for a dramatic change in direction.
Yeah, they have.
And all they've got is middle road, more of the same, more of the same. And you don't get to where we need to go by pivoting to the centre ground. And there have been specific things Nigel has said, which if people are listening very closely to him, will, make them wonder, where does Nigel really sit in the debate?
Be really interesting to hear from you all, by the way, listening this afternoon. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000, text to 87222. We'll get some calls on. Couple of final quick things, Ben. One guaranteed to get your goat, and the second one mine. Foreign criminals reported today more likely to be arrested for sexual offences, which, of course, would beg the suggestion that if there were less foreign criminals in this country because we were stronger in terms of dealing with immigration and our borders, English foreign nationals 3 times more likely to be arrested and charged for sexual offences. Another example of why we should be stronger, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and again, I'm going to use the word timid. We've been made timid by this notion that if you face up to reality and you look at the stats as you've just done and you call it out, you're somehow racist or prejudiced. Those are the stats. You've got to react to the stats and protect the country and, govern it in a way that protect it from that sort of thing being perpetuated. And at the heart of it all is borders. We've forgotten borders in the Western civilized world. And it's not civilized not to have borders. To take down your borders and welcome everyone into your country, that's not civilized, because what you're doing is exposing civil society to an assault. And that's what we're increasingly seeing. And it is only civilized that we enforce our borders. That is how we protect civil society. It's critical.
Can I just do a quick call? Are you all right to be part of this call?
Sure, absolutely.
Laura Jane is in Hampshire. Laura, you're on Talk Drive. Ben is with me. What would you like to say?
Well, I've been trying to talk to Ben since I first joined Reform, but we have our first local branch meeting here in it's the North Southampton Romsey possible constituency. I just wish that somehow I'm older than both you and other people. I wish I could shake you, Ben. Please come back. We need you. Everything you're talking about is sensible. We need your intellect. We need your gentlemanly qualities. We need everything that you can offer. And we need all the help we can get. You're right. We need a new political system. And I believe firmly in reform for that. And I also feel strongly that Elon Musk should not be funding us simply because that's what we're trying to get away from, is money people pulling strings of political parties and politicians. And it's very dangerous to get involved with people like that, because they're only in it for being able to pull strings. We want a simplified system, but we do need your intellect, and I wish with all my might and my elderliness that you would come back and somehow solve the differences. I hate using the word please eat humble pie, because it's not what I intend. I can't find the right words, but I just wish, because we need all the help we can get, and I respect you enormously, Ben, and I feel very strongly. Come down and see us at our new branch meeting in Hampshire.
Let him respond. Let him respond while somebody pushes a button in my ear. Ben Habib, you're adored by many.
Well, I'm very grateful for those kind comments. And for me, it's not about anything personal with Nigel. I've said that repeatedly. It's not personal. It's critical to me that the party is democratized. By the way, the trigger point for me leaving the party was me finding out that headquarters had banned branches from meeting me. And of course, that was basically a signal to me that the party no longer wants me. It's not about eating humble pie. I'm very happy to eat humble pie. If I make a mistake, I will apologize. For me, it's about the party being democratized, the checks and balances being in place, and the party having an agenda which is capable of saving the country. And even though I'm not in the party, I will go on campaigning, saying what I'm saying without fear or favor. And I hope some of that will land on the leadership of Reform and they'll take note of it. But I'm delighted, I would be delighted to come to Romsey and speak to you, but you better check with HQ whether they would be equally delighted. They may not be.
I love it. Laura Jane, thank you. And Ben Habib, I really appreciate it, mate. Thank you for... you can speak for the next 3 hours because the voice is holding up so far. We're very, very grateful. Always a pleasure to have you on. Happy New Year. Ben Habib, former MEP and Brexiteer, and so many people inside Reform saying somehow, please God, can there be a system whereby he comes back? If you want to be on like Laura Jane, 0344 499 1000, your text messages 87222, start your message with the word talk. This is Drive Time next from the Daily Telegraph. Poppy Coburn on Drive. We're coming back in 3.
It's a mixed bag, but a lot of the country, David, covered by warnings of some sort, including, as I say, that Amber Alert, which says that the Met Office describe as an alert, which means travel could be impacted. So you should potentially think about changing your travel plans over the next 24, 48 hours.
And just in terms of that, I assume the usual advice, just keep an eye on the travel alerts, make sure you contact the operator, that kind of stuff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 4:25. We're live across the United Kingdom. This is JK and Drive for Monday the 6th of January. Welcome back to Talk, the home of free speech and common sense, and the man who couldn't speak for 10 days. So I'm being really careful. And they're all very happy. I'm not shouting. 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. Our next guest, delighted to have her here. Been a while. Assistant comment editor of the Daily Telegraph. We say Happy New Year. Poppy Coburn, how are you, Pops?
Happy New Year. I'd like to say it is a Happy New Year in Britain, but it's probably not, is it?
Not really. And because I'm a man and I moan about everything, I spent 2 weeks in bed with the flu and I feel rotten still. So there we go.
And it's not man flu. It's actually the very nasty one that's going down. Don't worry, it's taking my mum out too.
It's always, everybody says to me, my mum had that or my dad had that, which makes me realise I should definitely have that flu jab next year. Poppy, welcome to the show. Just very quickly, because you cover America, and I'd love your response. I mean, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has just announced that he is stepping down as Prime Minister after, I think, something like 9 years. No time scale yet. He might have to stay on. It's a different system there. But my summing up would be, thank God, another woke liberal disappears into the sunset as Donald Trump arrives in town on his Charger. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he's got 3 months till national election is coming. That is going to be utterly humiliating. I mean, talk about a landslide, not a Keir Starmer landslide, a real. People despise Trudeau. You know, Canadians, they're very polite people. You know, they're very softly spoken. The way they will talk about Justin Trudeau in the last couple of years is pretty unbelievable. He has failed on basically every regard. He's ruined their energy policy. He's upset their relationship with America. Now Trump's asking them to be a 51st state. And of course, he's opened the floodgates to a massive scale of immigration from all over the world, which has been extremely...
Who does that sound like? I'm trying to think who that sounds like.
But it makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, all of these politicians, you'd think one of them would learn. You would think one of them would look at what happened to the Conservative Party and go, oh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do that. Didn't seem to work over there. But they never do. They seem to keep
said it before Christmas on so many occasions. I don't understand why you wouldn't, as a politician in whatever country, stand up and say, look, this is my plan. I've listened to this, this and this. I'm going to take you with me. If I get it wrong, I'll put my hands in the air. I'll make mistakes. There'll be highs and lows. These people set out. It's a bit like the Labour Party with this agenda about, you know, the green economy, and we've got to... I mean, I'd love your response to this, because this will send my mother and father-in-law, who are listening, over the edge. This is only today. The government has opened the door to scrapping free prescriptions to the over 60s to raise more money for the NHS. So if you're over 60, which I will be on July the 8th, so now if I don't get frozen to death by the bloody Labour Party, I'm going to die because I can't get the medicine that I need if I can't afford it. It is utterly unbelievable.
Also, what is the framing here? To save money for the NHS. Sorry, what's the NHS for? It's the National Health Service.
And what's going to happen to the old people who don't... What's going to happen to the people who can't afford to buy the prescriptions? They're going to end up back in the bloody hospital.
Right, exactly. And, you know, this is what people don't understand. If you're over 60, if you're a pensioner, if you haven't got much money left, that £15 whatever prescription fee, that's a lot of money to you. It's the same thing with the winter fuel allowance. People talk about the elderly in this country like they're all secret millionaires. That is simply not true. But it's another instance of this government telling everyone they have to tighten their belts Well, unless you're an asylum seeker, in which case don't worry about it. Unless you're one of our public sector union workers, in which case we're going to bung you a big pay rise. It is literally one rule for one group of people and one rule for another. And if you don't vote Labour, sorry, you're out of luck. You're not going to get
It's really
anything
interesting, isn't it? So we're going to freeze the pensions to death. Labour's own advice told them that 4,000 pensioners could die this winter, and we know that cold spell is on the way and is continuing. And now we're going to cancel prescriptions for over 60s. And yet today we find out the Work and Pensions Department, and by the way, not just under Labour, but if I was him, I'd be dealing with something like this, has paid out £500 million over the last 4 years to dead people, right? And they have no real ability or right legally to get that money back. I mean, priorities, it's all wrong.
Well, honestly, I think if people knew the true scale of bureaucratic incompetence in the civil service, considering how much money, how many people are employed by it every year, it would shock you. And that is just talking about the national civil service. If you look into what some of the local councils are doing, where all of that money is going, I mean, we are talking about billions of pounds wasted every year. And again, we're still told there's no money left. Well, of course there is money left. If we can afford to be giving these mistaken payments, millions of pounds worth, there is money that is not being properly allocated. So somebody needs to be looking for it.
It's almost
and surely
as if
we're going to... yeah.
It's just, to me, there doesn't seem to be any plan about the importance of the right way to behave. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I'd be sorting out the DWP, I'd be looking after pensioners. Foreign criminals, we find out today, are more likely, 3 times more likely to be arrested for sexual offences. Close the bloody borders then. Make it more difficult. Don't shout, the voice will go. Make it more difficult for them to come into the country.
No, but this one really hits quite home for me, because, you know, I've had conversations with some young women my own age who live in London and feel totally petrified to walk home alone at night. And if you ask a lot of them, like, who's doing this to you? A lot of cases it will be people. I mean, I think there was a television presenter, Alex Phillips, who got a lot of stick for saying this, but some of them are foreign nationals. You can tell that they're foreign nationals. They don't speak English. They'll be harassing you. And if you try and say something about it, everybody goes, oh, well, you can't say that. How dare you say that? And you, as a victim, you're suddenly turned around and you're the bad person.
Why are you not allowed to say that if it's factual? That's like the people who...
But then if you can't speak about these things...
But that's it's like people in this country who argue with me on this show when I say stop and search, in my opinion, should be escalated in London. I listened to that dreadful man who got a bleeding knighthood while I've been on holiday, Sir Sadiq. I'll never call him Sir Sadiq. He presides over all these things that are seemingly important in his woke world, but does nothing for knife crime. Stop and search, he will tell you, is racist. But 83% of the crimes against and by young men in this city, in London, are by young black men. That's not racist, that's a fact. It's the same as you're saying about sexual problems with foreign nationals. Why are we too bloody scared to do it?
And if we can't talk about it, if we cannot engage in our free speech rights and say this is what's going on, then people will continue to be victimised.
Yeah.
This is not just a word game. This is not about people getting offended. This is about people's lives. This is about people's lives in some cases being ruined. This is about people sometimes being raped or murdered.
Well,
I don't care if that hurts feelings. If government ministers of all people cannot openly stand up and say, we've got a major problem here, we need to fix this, then who can?
Well, the other thing this weekend...
that's their job.
Completely. And the other thing this weekend, of course, is and I mean, I've been told by numerous people I shouldn't talk about it. I've been talking about it for months. What happened in Rotherham and Rochdale, the grooming gangs in this country, these were British Pakistani men. It took 8 long years to bring them to justice, and the police themselves admitted that the reason it took so long was because they feared, I don't know how they put it, causing cultural problems amongst communities, right? So there's me before Christmas going, so you can rape a child and get away with it, depending on the colour of your skin, for fear of... That's not how you police. You police on you break the law. And there was this story over the weekend, people are making all sorts of comments about there should be an inquiry, and did Starmer and people... Apparently in 2008, somebody inside the Labour government said they've made informed choices, the police shouldn't get involved. This is disgusting. There should absolutely be an inquiry into what happened in Rotherham. Not just the Labour Party, the Tories should have brought this in as well. We should be able to look after kids. I think it's just, the world's gone mad, man.
Well, look at the speech that Keir Starmer gave today. What does he talk about? He talks about people being rude to Jess Phillips. Now, Elon Musk did say things that were very inappropriate about Jess Phillips. I would say reflective of the strength of feeling that people have about these horrific cases. Okay, but what does he say? What does he blame this on? The far right and people trying to score political points.
Yep.
Well, I'm sorry, this is a political issue. This was a cover-up. This was a cover-up that involved police forces, social workers, that involved the sexual assault of thousands of children. This should be on the news every day. It is the biggest scandal in modern British history, bar none. It should be in the news all the time. Politicians should not just be apologising, they should be acting.
We've had this amazing woman, Maggie Oliver, who's fronted this out. You know, she resigned from the Greater Manchester Police because of the ineffectiveness. There was a sex abuse inquiry backed by Labour. She says, quite rightly, it didn't properly investigate the grooming gangs. It took 8 years. I think that's a stain on our society as much as it is what we talk about foreign criminals committing these crimes. But, of course, we live in a world now, Poppy, where there's millions of people who say, oh, that's disrespectful to certain minorities or certain... No. If you rape a child or you rape or murder somebody, I don't care the colour of your skin, I don't care where you've come from, you should feel, surely, the full force of the law and the justice system. It should not be on not wanting... Hold on a second. If that was my daughter... It doesn't matter. I mean, for God's sake, that's awful.
I know. And the tragedy is, as well, we talk about it like it is historic. Actually, people who have knowledge on the ground are saying these cases were still going on long after the first media reports were coming out in 2014. There are still cases of children who are being trafficked in the United Kingdom, and we're being told that we can't have another inquiry. Have you stopped this? Can Keir Starmer get up on stage and tell people with a straight face this is no longer going on? I don't think he can. I think he knows that that's not true. Okay, and until he can say that, then we need an inquiry at the very minimum. Are you happy to stay there while I take a call? I want you to be involved. We're going to Exeter. David Poppy's with me. You've got a couple of minutes on Drive. What do you want to say?
Just listening to Maggie Oliver this morning, and I have worked and spoken with a few of her associates on this very issue, and what you've got really... It was highlighted not just by Elon Musk, but a lot of other people have been trying to push it for quite a while, that the source and causation of this failure of leadership started with Gordon Brown, with the memo, where he, the cabinet decision, collective responsibility, arbitrarily decided to ignore the law. So, it's pretty binary. Do we have the rule of law, or do we have the abuse of arbitrary power? They chose to ignore statutory rape. So Maggie Oliver, toll-faced copper, she's got guts, stood up and went, no, I want to go and prosecute these people. I want to put them in, I want to nick them. But what we've got, all the chiefs of police all went, well, no, we've been told by the Home Office we're not going to do that because it's come from Cabinet. No, but that's where the challenge has got to go. We've got to go to Brown and the Cabinet at the time and go, right, what was going on? What's actually the situation here? Because, I'm not on my own with this. What I see there is abuse of arbitrary power, and it's revealing, this particular thing is revealed just how badly our system of governance is broken.
And that to me, just very quickly, that's a very intelligent way of looking at it, and I'm sure you're spot on. I'm just sat here and wondering how anybody of whatever level, be it a civil servant or a politician, a journalist, a commentator, a broadcaster, can say... they made an informed choice. Well, that's an 8-year-old child being raped. How does anybody sit, Poppy, around a cabinet table, wherever, and make that bloody decision? That's an outrage.
And isn't this just proof, by the way, that this is a political issue?
Yeah.
It was a political choice that was being made that involved the CPS and involved cabinet ministers, in which case it's not just a problem. I mean, obviously, let's send the perpetrators at the very least to jail and deport the people we can deport. But this is an institutional failing. We should go after this like the Catholic Church went after child sexual abuses. Okay, there should be complete and total audit. Who said what? Who did what? Who gave this advice? Why did they give this advice? And I want this to be televised like we did with the COVID inquiry. That is what we should be expecting from the government at the moment. Not weasel words about emboldening the far right and saying you don't like Elon Musk. That is totally, totally irrelevant.
Completely agree with you. David in Exeter, thank you. Poppy, do me a favour. I'm doing this publicly. Will you come on next week? Come on every week. We love you. Please say yes.
I shall.
Fantastic. Thank you, Poppy Coburn, Assistant Comment Editor at the Daily Telegraph. What is it? 21 minutes to 5 o'clock. Voice is lasting if you want to be on the show. 0344 499 1000. Text to 87222. So much to talk about. The Labour Party could scrap free prescriptions for over 60s. That's gone down like a lead balloon, quite rightly. Musk has called for Nigel Farage to be replaced. Apparently he's not up to the job. Foreign criminals, 3 times more likely to be arrested for sexual offences. Close the bloody borders. And if you thought this country was on its backside, don't worry. The DWP gave out £500 million to people who are dead, whilst the rest of us are struggling. 20 to 5 on Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
18 minutes to 5 o'clock, drive time on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. This is JK till 7. The voices. This is extraordinary, by the way. I love people who listen to radio. Jeremy, to get rid of the flu, if you chop up a lemon, a piece of fresh ginger and a pineapple but leave the skin on, wash the pineapple very well because the skin is... Put it in a pan with a clove of garlic, boil for 15 minutes and drink 2 cups 3 times a day, it'll go. Plus, I've said a prayer. I think the prayer might work well more. Anyway, listen, loads of you texting. Thank you so much indeed for all your messages. Hello to Tracy in Bromley. She says that Farage has the same views as he did in UKIP, but if he said them now, the media would shut him down. Simon McCabe, Happy New Year to you. He says, is it just me, or isn't it a little rich of Sir Keir Starmer to have a pop at someone for spreading misinformation and lies? Wasn't Sir Keir and the whole damn Labour Party's election campaign to what we know now fully based on misinformation and lies? Probably a very true point. Margaret, Happy New Year, JK. It's a big birthday year this year for you, isn't it? Thanks, mate. That's great. Yeah. Brilliant. 60. Kev's in Southampton. All the woke Liberals doing a run of next Germany and France. Yeah, absolutely, Kev. We're with you. This is on the day that Justin Trudeau resigns as Canadian Prime Minister. You heard Poppy Coburn say he is about as popular as toilet paper, and good riddance to bad rubbish. 0344 499 1000. Delighted to welcome our next guest, who will indeed talk all the way to the news at 5, because that's what he does for a living. Benedict Spence, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. Who is this Benjamin character?
What's happened to the hair? You look like you've been dragged through a hedge backwards, boy. What's going on?
I'm starting this year as Labour mean for us to go on, and that's a complete mess.
Fantastic. A good Christmas? Good time?
Yes, I'm alive. That's a positive thing. I tried. I drank rather a lot, but it all worked out for the best.
Doesn't make you a bad person, Spence. Let me just tell you. Where should we start? I actually don't want to start with Musk. I don't want to start with Trudeau. You can get rid of that. I want to start differently. Labour could scrap free prescriptions for over 60s. So if you don't freeze them to death, we're going to make sure they don't get the medicine, right, that will make them better. What the hell is he thinking, Benedict? The man's a nutter.
I tell you what, it's a hell of a way to reverse the demographic crisis that we have in this country. We have too many old people. I know. Let's turn off the heating and let's limit their access to medicine. And also, let's pass assisted dying whilst we're at it. You know, there's a perfect storm of ways to completely upend the demographic crisis. Maybe it'll work. Who knows? Obviously, this isn't exactly what they're trying to do. It's just a rather unfortunate thing that we're lumbered with a prime minister who seems to be trying to get as many bad things out of the way early. But the problem is we just don't know how many bad things he's got in store for us, so it just sort of keeps on getting worse. But I tell you what, it's a great day to bury bad news, given all the Musk stuff that's going on. He could run out all sorts of announcements, and actually many people wouldn't be paying attention to it.
That's exactly why I wanted to talk about it first, because I believe that many old age pensioners listening to this will be as offended as I am, because of course the big news is that from July, Benedict, I know it's impossible to believe, but I am 60.
Good Lord, I'm going to fall off my stool. How on earth have you managed to get to 60? That's incredible.
Brilliant. Well, certainly by drinking.
You don't look a day over 59.
Not drinking as much as you. Let's talk about the big news story of the day. Elon Musk calling for Farage to be replaced. We saw those great love-in pictures from Mar-a-Lago a few weeks ago. We heard all the rumours about a huge donation to the Conservative, to the Reform Party, and Labour and the Tories are running around saying, is this right, is this right? All of a sudden, over the weekend, on the back of this Tommy Robinson comment, I think, Nigel Farage says, no, I don't want Tommy Robinson in my party. That's not how I see it. Musk fires back. Reform needs a new leader. I mean, this was from nowhere. What is your take on this? Is this because they've been playing with this guy and they're always going to get their fingers burnt, or what?
I think Elon Musk doesn't have a good grasp of the current lay of the land of British politics, is ultimately what I think. I think that he's sort of gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, and he has come up with a certain perspective that is not accurate. And I would say that even amongst sort of right-wing reform voters, Tommy Robinson is politically very toxic. I know that there are lots of people that like him. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. He's never going to be a mainstream political figure. No party can touch him. It's sensible that Farage, who, if you want Farage to be Prime Minister or anything approaching that, needs to win over moderates and centrists at some point and disillusioned Labour voters. I'm sorry, you can't be getting into bed with...
All right, but no, and I agree with that myself personally, but the point that Ben Habib made, and I would love to have had you on together, was, and he didn't use Tommy Robinson as an example, but what he said was that Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer became centrists. That's why reform, certainly on the right, grew. His criticism of Farage on this show 45 minutes ago was that he doesn't want the Reform Party to become centrist and moderate. He wants it to be out on a limb saying the things that need to be said, which begs the question to you, as I put to him. Can you get elected in the United Kingdom by going out on a limb, or do you have to, at some point, try and gain some of that middle ground?
I think you absolutely can get elected on the right. It takes a bit of bravado, it takes some bravery. And I also think you can do that without sort of aligning yourself with somebody with multiple criminal convictions for an array of things. And I know that people are trying to say that Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner. All prisoners are political by definition. It's a really foolish thing to try and spin that. Ultimately, he's been in prison for a myriad of things, including intent to supply Class A drugs and assault. Yeah, I'm sorry, but there are reasons beyond his political views why he is politically unpalatable. And I understand Ben Habib has very real concerns about the democratic direction of reform. And they're concerns actually that I sort of share, because reform is at a very delicate stage in its life. I know it's doing very well in the polls, but that's partly because the other two parties are doing very badly. It is buffeted by external forces beyond its control. Elon Musk is one of those. But realistically, Farage does not have to move to the centre to win. He can stay on the right and still win. He just has to convince centrists that actually the Overton window has shifted, that he is not some sort of nightmare fascist about to goose-step his way down Trafalgar Square, that he is going to do things in the best interest of the country. And I think when it comes to things like grooming gangs and all that sort of thing, centrists, normal people, moderate people, consider this stuff to be abhorrent and beyond the pale. That's where he will pick up that vote, by saying what normal, decent people think about these things and saying, look, it's fine to have some right-wing views on things like law and order. It's normal, in fact, to have these views. That's where he'll win it, not by allying himself with people like Tommy Robinson.
When you say win it, do you believe that Reform under Nigel Farage could win the next election?
As things currently stand, I don't know if they could win, but they could certainly overtake the Conservatives from the current position. And that would give them a good launch pad potentially to win the next general election, or who knows what might happen in terms of the political chicanery of coalition building. I don't think they would build a coalition, but that's why I'm saying as things currently stand, because that's with Kemi Badenoch as leader of the Conservative Party. I think things change if, as I suspect they will, they get rid of Kemi Badenoch. And then, of course, they can go one of two ways. They can go for the slightly more sort of centrist direction. They can get a James Cleverly in or something like that, which I think would be the death knell for the party. Or they could get in somebody like a Robert Jenrick, who I think would, A, be more inclined to do a deal with reform, but would also, B, be much more of a threat to reform because he speaks much more of their language.
Do you believe that Kemi Badenoch won't last?
She won't last, no.
Interesting. You're on Double Money. Don't go anywhere. Go and brush your hair in the break. 10 to 5. We're coming back on Drive with Benedict Spence next.
Since I first became aware of what we call grooming gangs, but I think rape gangs is a better description. In 2005, when I first learned about this horrific crime and how it has destroyed thousands and thousands of children's lives, I was horrified that nothing was being done. I worked on a case that was closed down by Greater Manchester Police, the official reason being because they would not put resources in. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, JK on Drive at Talk, the home of common sense and free speech. Benedict Spence is here. Benedict, I'd like your discernible response to what I've just read here. Okay? Jez, put this to Benedict. To lighten things on another crap news day, why is that photo of you and the other weekday presenters shown during the ad break? Why is it so awful? Ian Collins looks like a hitman. Mike Graham looks like a gangland boss. Julie looks like an uptight, no, just a CEO. You look like a doggy second-hand car dealer. I think that means dodgy. And Kev looks like a boring maths teacher. Mark in Coventry. So, are completely screwed, aren't we, by that?
I think Mike Graham, the mob boss, I think that's quite a good image, frankly. I like the sound of that. I mean, to be fair, none of you can be looking worse than how I currently look. I mean, look at the state of my hair.
This is
like
true.
I've been for a couple of weeks.
Fantastic. 5 to 5. So much to talk about. We've talked Musk. We've talked Nigel Farage. We've talked about Labour's plan to scrap free prescriptions. You'll like this as well. Actually, this is the reality of what we just talked about. This is from a pensioner who wants to remain anonymous. Jez, I'm a pensioner with several health issues. I take 10 different medications per day. Now to stay alive, I can take my medicine but freeze and not eat, or a mix of the three, and Starmer thinks he's got important decisions to make. That's the reality for many people, isn't it, Benedict?
It is, and whilst Labour will turn around and say that they have very difficult decisions to make for the benefit of the country in general, I think the problem is people can't see the end game of all of this. I think if people could see a roadmap as to how this would improve, a timeline maybe, then I think people would be a lot more understanding. There'd still be a lot of pain and unhappiness about it, but I think people would be more prepared to give the Prime Minister and the government the time of the day. But I don't think they trust them fundamentally, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that the government is not signalling that it knows what the timeline is. Keir Starmer just sort of turning around after the election and going, well, it's going to take at least 10 years, and being sort of very woolly about it. That nobody's going to buy into that. Nobody's going to accept that. It's too long a timeline, and it's simply not giving us enough detail.
Talking about timelines, the grooming gangs, this has kicked off massively. Musk is involved, but the reality is, and we talked about this loads on the show, what happened in Rochdale, what happened in Rotherham, to me is a disgrace anyway. But when we hear that the police were not frightened but reticent to do anything about it in case, of course, it caused problems culturally, which is appalling. British Pakistani men. The law's the law where I come from. Should there not be a public inquiry? And this isn't, by the way, just at Labour's door. This is 8 years ago. This should have been done a long time ago, shouldn't it, Benedict?
But this is something that would be all-encompassing for the political class of this country, and that's why I suspect it's not wanted, it's not desired, because I think many, many people would be implemented, not necessarily in deliberate policy decisions, but in that sort of passive, well, it's best not to because you don't want to end up with the consequences. And that's the banality of the situation and where a lot of the wickedness sort of comes through. I don't believe fundamentally that lots of police officers and social workers are evil people, but I do believe that a lot of them have made very, very bad decisions based on advice they've been given on higher-ups that has informed their actions, which has allowed people to be harmed and gone under the radar, and in some parts be raped, tortured and murdered, sadly.
And the responsibility is at the very top then, and something needs to be done about it.
Yeah,
you can't turn a blind eye to young children being abused.
You can't, and this is what I find so horrendous, which is that the whole point of the state is to uphold your rights and your freedom and your safety.
Yes.
And that borders, and that means laws. And at the very top of that is vulnerable people. Children are the most vulnerable in society. This is an evolutionary thing. People have visceral responses when they see children in danger, when, it's not even their children. People have opinions. They say you shouldn't be doing that. People are more than happy to weigh in on when it comes to the safeguarding of children. So how is it that this perfectly natural instinct was just picked up and put by the wayside when people were talking about things like community relations? There's no moral argument to be made that is an acceptable trade-off. And if it was any other country that said the rape of children is acceptable for community relations, we would call that country barbaric.
I completely agree. Final call of the hour. Benedict, stay with me to the news. Chris is in Cambridge. Chris, myself and Benedict, you got 2 minutes. What'd you say?
Hi, Jerry. I'm on 23 tablets a day, 2 insulin injections, 3 lots of eye drops for glaucoma. I can carry on telling you more. What's he going to do? Give me a compulsory euthanasia?
Wow. It's exactly what we were saying, Benedict, just now. I mean, here's a gentleman, 23 medications a day. Yep. How much is that going to cost you if you have to pay for your own prescriptions?
I have no idea. The insulin would cost me about something like £300 a week.
Would you be able to afford it?
No.
What do you make of this Labour government?
This way, we do not get. We just get out of the free £300. We don't get it, but we can't claim for anything for help.
Why do you think that Starmer... I've only got a minute, but why do you think that Starmer is so apparently against the pensioners? Is it because pensioners won't be around when he needs to be re-elected?
I think that's part of it. I think he's just deliberately trying to turn us into a communist state, and he's getting rid of anybody who might have any cash behind them.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Chris in Cambridge, thank you, Benedict. Sum up that call. I just don't understand. Poppy Coburn said it. Do these politicians not listen to real people?
No, they don't at all. And the Labour Party actually even less than the Conservatives do. They live in an ideological existence which explains very many of their decisions, including, for instance, the decisions they're making on things like education. They're not based in reality at all. It's what they think is morally the right thing to do. You can see that also with things like the Chagos Islands or foreign aid. When it comes to the idea of assisted dying and, what's going to happen to the elderly, I don't think it is the intention for the government to push people into assisted suicide. But we've seen what happened in Canada. Initially, it's for terminally ill people, and then slowly, the remit has expanded, and then it's all sorts of vulnerable people.
Good to have you forever. You're a legend. Benedict Spence, thank you very much indeed. Stand by, my friends. The news at 5 is next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
There you are, hour 2 of Drive for Monday afternoon, the 6th of January. This is JK back on Talk, the home of common sense and free speech. Lost my voice, but it's back, which has hacked off a lot of people. Did you get what I did there? Hacked off. Thanks for tuning in. What a day for news. So much to talk about. We'll talk more about Musk and Farage. We'll talk about Labour's plan to scrap prescriptions for over 60s. We'll talk about foreign criminals, the DWP paying out 500 million people to a debt, for goodness sake. But you know what? When this station is about the things it should be about, which is common sense, there's only one person you need to bring. A man who's over 60 who from now on will have to pay for his own prescriptions. A man who, like me, has got a bit of a chesty cough as old age gets into his bones. Ladies and gentlemen, a Happy New Year to the legend that is Peter Bleksley.
And Happy New Year to you, Mr.
Can't even say it, can you?
No, exactly. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, man, was I ill? Were you ill?
Yeah.
What, you've been ill as well?
Yeah, I've had that dreaded lurgy that's been going around.
Did you drink your way through it, or what? Because
I think I drank my way into it, if the truth be known.
You see, I couldn't even get out of bed, man. I've never been like that.
Grim, wasn't it?
But actually on the day, by the way, very quickly before we talk about why we got you here, on the day that it becomes apparent that the government has opened the door to scrapping free prescriptions for the over 60s. I'm a pensioner this year, you're a pensioner already. So what that means in this country is we have a socialist government that is saying, if we don't freeze you to bleeding death, we're going to make sure you cannot afford to buy the prescription that will keep you alive or well.
Forgive me for correcting you, but I don't get my old age pension until I'm 66, so I've got about a year to wait for that.
Oh, is that right? So
Yeah.
I've got 6 more years.
Well, it depends. You can go online on the government website.
Well, do you know what he's done? He's done what my old man used to do. Is the camera on me? You can go online. It's a little fingers like it's on a computer. You can go online.
Go online. And any details, date of birth and all of that.
Yeah.
And it will check your state pension. Because, of course, your state pension is not an automatic entitlement.
I don't think I'm going to get
It's
one.
dependent upon your national insurance contributions over the years.
Right.
I would urge anybody of whatever age they are, go online and do it, because if you've got gaps in your national insurance contributions, which means you might not necessarily receive the full state pension amount, it will tell you how you can make those gaps up, and in turn...
What is the state pension a week?
I think I will be eligible for about £220 a week.
Brilliant, that'd be good.
As of
Get you down
December
QPR
this
for a
year.
home game, pint of beer and a burger, won't it?
Indeed, it will.
So much to talk about. I wanna just, if I can, start with this appalling grooming gang story.
Yeah.
I mean, Maggie Oliver has been a shining light for so many people in this, and a shining light on this station. A woman who, through her honour and her ability to believe in certain things, resigned from GMP because this case, there was Rotherham, there was Rochdale, seemingly centred on police officers, men and women, not being as, how do we put this, as fervent in their desire to get a prosecution as they should be. It took 8 years. Many people, broadcasters like me, I was saying, why is this? And eventually it became apparent that the police were saying, well, we were worried about the cultural impact of blaming British Pakistani men. Over the weekend, there seems to have been information. There was a call for a public inquiry. Jess Phillips was slagged off by Elon Musk. But I thought even more frightening was this email or this story that in 2008, when Gordon Brown was the Prime Minister, there was sort of information given from high up to police bosses, who you always blame quite rightly, that the approach should be right to say that these young girls and boys had made informed choices and that it's best to leave it alone. Now, with the greatest respect, you're a father, I'm a grandfather. 8-year-old girls who get raped do not make informed choices, Peter Bleksley.
Of course not. Children cannot make informed decisions.
So how the hell does that... How does any politician think they're going to get away with that?
So this email, apparently, this directive, this letter, in whatever format it may have been written, and let's hope it's online somewhere, because, of course, it will be there forever somewhere, and somebody might even have printed it off and kept a copy of it as some kind of insurance policy. I certainly can think of a few police officers that would have done that, who would have been fervently against it, but when was sent such a directive, they'll have gone, right, I'm printing that off, I'm taking that
Let's
home
hope
with
they
me.
did. Let's hope somebody
stick
did.
it somewhere very, very secure, in case at some point I get my collar felt for the offence of, for example, misconduct in public office. Now, the offence of misconduct in public office is very unique and very different from most criminal offences, because in misconduct, doing nothing can be a criminal offence.
Wow.
See, whereas if you're a burglar, doing nothing is not burglary.
No.
You know, any other crime, virtually doing nothing.
Turning a blind eye is what you mean, right?
Yeah, so if you do nothing, that can be misconduct in public office, for which you can be charged and face a hefty sentence, if appropriate. So let's just see. That's what we need. That's what we want. That letter, that email, that directive. Somebody out there, please come forward through whatever trusted source you want, and let's get that out into the public domain. It is crucial. Let's prove that it existed.
Just stop there 1 second. Just explain to me. You know more about this than me. Somebody in a political position or civil servants, I'm not pointing any fingers, if this email is correct, felt it appropriate to write to senior policemen and women across the country, certainly in that area, and say, and I quote, our approach is, and by the way, I'm just dropping this in here, this isn't me making any allegations, but the Director of Public Prosecutions at the time was one, oh yes, Sir Keir Starmer, was to say, and I quote, the approach is these young girls made informed choices. Now, we were talking to Benedict Spence, and he said, and I thought it was really interesting, I don't know if people picked up on this, he said, the problem with this is that it probably implicates so many people that it's one of those great societal swept under the carpet moments. That is an absolute bloody disgrace if we're talking about children. And there should be nobody who could be spared or should be spared the long arm of the law if this is the case. And if those policemen and women were forced by their bosses, who were forced by politicians, who were forced by whoever, then those people need to be brought to justice, 1,000,000%.
Absolutely, no matter how many of them there are. And I understand what Mr. Spence says, and it could be unwieldy to the point where some might say this is almost impossible to pursue it, gather the evidence and prosecute. Well, there's one way to find out, isn't there? And that is to investigate, gather the evidence, and if need be, put it to the CPS to consider charges. Or the DPP, because quite often you need DPP
Do you think it's a cover-up?
To charge with misconduct in public office.
Do you think it's a cover-up?
Oh, I think there have been countless people that have not told the truth, that have not acted like they should have done, and have not done what they should have done. Clearly, the allegations cover dozens of towns, not the ones we know about where there's been half-baked inquiries, shall we say.
But Benedict made another point. If we as a society were looking at another country and another country was acting like this, we would say that was a barbaric race, that was a society in severe trouble. Why the hell has that allowed to have happened, if it has been allowed to happen, in the United Kingdom, for goodness sake?
The soul of a nation should be judged by how it treats its vulnerable,
absolutely,
in my opinion.
Yeah, completely.
The elderly, the children, and those who have unfortunate disabilities and such like.
Absolutely.
That's how you judge the soul of a nation. This nation has, regrettably, for the last couple of decades at least, allowed thousands of vulnerable children to be repeatedly, viciously, sexually abused, raped, and some have been killed. People have been murdered throughout these.
How does that...
Including a child sex abuse victim and the mother whose house was petrol bombed, they burnt alive, and that was used by some as a threat to others to keep people silent. The extent of the depravity and the criminality knows no bounds. Therefore, the investigation into it, the judge-led full public inquiry with the powers to compel people to give evidence is an absolute must.
Couldn't agree more. Let's go to Peterborough. You're staying with me. Let's go to Karen in Peterborough. Peter Bleksley's with me. Karen, you're on Talk Drive. What you got?
Hi, I'm actually from Peterborough and we've never had an inquiry. So although people know what happened in other cities, in 2014 the BBC did an article that said that 1 in 280 Pakistani men in Peterborough were raping and abusing young girls. We know that some of the leaders of some of those gangs were brought to justice, but how many of the other people that are wandering around are actually involved in that? We have no idea. We have no idea of the scale. We have no idea who was covering it up. We literally have no idea. And when people talk about the same ones, there were 50 places. It's not just the ones that everyone keeps mentioning all the time. It also includes the ones no one knows about, like Peterborough.
That's exactly, Pete, with respect, what you were just saying. We talk about Rochdale, we talk about Rotherham. This lady's talking about Peterborough, and before everybody jumps up and down, she talked about how a BBC report said that 1 in 280 Pakistani men had been found that they were doing these things. This isn't racism. This is a fact. This is fact.
Oldham, Telford, Oxford, the list goes on and on. Thanks to that great caller, we'll add Peterborough. And there are many others, which, as she quite brilliantly points out, we have simply not heard about. The other point that she raises is, yes, the facilitators, as I would call it. Who facilitated this offending? In other words, Who looked the other way? Who knew and said nothing? And in what positions did those people occupy?
This is my problem, right? Are you still there, Karen?
Yes, I'm here.
This is where I'm going to get into trouble, I'm sure. In a civilised society, as Pete said, the one thing is you look after certain people. Kids, that's a no-brainer to me. You talk about, Peter, who covered this up. Why would anybody across any land or a bunch of people think it was okay? They're sick people.
We know why it was covered up.
Why?
By so many people. Because it does not fit the narrative that so many people try to ram down our throats to this very day, that we all live in a multicultural nirvana where we all get along happily-go-lucky, side by side, without any hint of disquiet, division or angst or anger towards one another. The truth is, yes, up to a point, we've had some brilliant integration of communities who've been here for decades and are as British as you, me, roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. But there are some communities that have come to this nation in more recent times who are not integrated in any way, shape or form.
Not integrated because they don't want to be, or not integrated because the society they've joined hasn't integrated them?
They're not integrated because some of them don't speak English. They're not integrated because they live in communities where there is barely a white face left in those communities, and they live in some communities where they have no respect for the law of the land, and they live by a religious law and have their own courts or councils to dictate what is and isn't permitted. And there are many other examples, unfortunately, of a lack of integration. But certain politicians want to have you believe that we all live arm in arm, harmoniously, side by side.
So why is it when this station, when I will highlight these facts, then there will be people on the Liberal left who will call us racist and outrageous?
Yes, of course, and there are people that...
Is it racist to say that?
No, it's a fact. It's an absolute, undeniable truth that not everybody in this country is happily integrated, assimilated into British life, who abides by British laws, British values and the customs and the things that we hold dear. Now, of course, us fellow white people will not agree with everything that I say or I do. You know, we understand that. But that I was born and raised into, that which was kind of bred into me from a very young age, about manners, courtesy, tolerance, respect for others,
what's right and
helping
wrong,
others, doing your bit for charity, volunteering, all that kind of stuff, the ethos of public service, which I did for so many years, all that kind of stuff, which I was born and raised in. For many people who have come to this country in recent times, simply does not exist. And they have no respect for this country. They quite enjoy taking from it whatever they can, but they are not integrated, they are not assimilated, and we are not living joyously side by side. There, I've said it. Jump on social media, call me whatever names you like, but I have just spoken the truth. And so many of my black, Asian and coloured people, including friends that I know will happily agree with what I've just said.
Well, I agree with it. 17 minutes past 5. Thank you to Karen and Peter. But the other story I wanted to talk to you about, I love having you on. Jesus, honestly, it's like sitting opposite me, only obviously a slightly older version. Foreign nationals, he didn't react, are more likely by 3 times to be arrested for sexual offences as British citizens, according to the first analysis revealing the scale of crime by migrants. We've talked about our borders. We've talked about, making it less attractive to be in this country. We find out today that foreign criminals, are 3 times more likely to commit serious sexual offences. So close the bloody borders.
But then you see, a critic of me and what I say will then turn round, flip the stats and say loads more white people than foreigners get arrested for crimes, which, of course, is actually factually correct.
Right.
But what you've just said as well is, of course, entirely correct. A higher proportion of foreigners get arrested for sexual offences and other crimes a higher proportion than they do of Indigenous British people. That, again, is an undeniable fact. So what are we doing about borders? What are we doing about immigration, both legal and illegal? What are we doing about trying to conserve and treasure and hold on to those things that so many people in Britain love and want to keep hold of, whether that be a slice of Victoria sponge, going to church on a Sunday, going to football on a Saturday, whatever else it might be about Britain, rugby, cricket, tolerance, volunteering, the incredible charities we have, all those wonderful, millions of wonderful people that we've got in this country. What is happening to conserve those, to stop the face, the fabric, and the very essence of Britain being eroded to the point where it doesn't work at all?
I was having a conversation with a father-in-law some weeks ago, and here's the fact, right, that Rob was saying, and he's right. There are plenty of examples in this country of people who have come to this country, and you and I know, and this is a fact, whether people like this on the left or not, who have brought real quality and real leadership and have built businesses and have ingrained themselves in this country. What so many now object to, people, is people who seemingly come to this country either in a dodgy way or by finding a loophole, take everything from this country, give nothing to this country, whilst also seemingly spending most of their time slagging off or trying to destroy the very things that made this country the place they wanted to come to in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And I don't understand that. I've never understood that.
No.
Embrace this country, live in this country, fantastic. Don't take the PISS out of this country.
Exactly. I'm going to name drop a couple of people here, right? Cowpesh, who runs our local news agent.
Yeah.
Okay.
We like Cowpesh.
Oh, we adore him.
We like Cowpesh.
In our community, seriously, in our community, he is one of the most highly respected people, and he is absolutely wonderful, as is his wife, as are his children, who, of course, were born and raised in this country, because Cowpesh came here many decades ago. He has run that news agents for decades. It is the very heartbeat, centre, fulcrum of our community. And that man gets up earlier than me and goes to bed later than me. He's an absolute grafter and a joy and goes the extra mile. 2 doors down is another name drop, the Segor, OK? The local curry house. It is wonderful, absolutely tremendous. The food, the service, the staff. And I count them as friends. And guess what? Of course, they're Muslim people, right? Now, the dad, who ran the Segor for over 40 years, recently handed it over to a younger relative who now runs it. And when I'm talking to them, as I often do, over a curry or when I've finished and I'm just, you know, paying my bill, leaning on the bar.
Having another beer.
Before I go home, yes, correct. You know, we talk about faith. I ask them about what being a Muslim means to them, and I often say to them, you know, what do I say to people who are concerned about the rise of Islam in the UK? What would you say I could say to them? You know, and we bounce things like this around. And I said, and just brilliant quote from the son who now runs it the other night, and he said, my dad came here 40 years ago, has run this restaurant successfully, built it into what it is. It's been extended over the years and all that, some wonderful premises. He said, and has given him and us a great, great life. He said, why would we want to change anything? We love Britain just how it was when Dad came here with the opportunity to start this restaurant. We don't want to change a thing.
Mate, I sometimes like to come to work because I realise that it's not just me. And I think what you do so brilliantly, Pete, and I mean this, is you manage to put into words that, yeah, there'll be people who go outrageous, but there's many millions of people who will agree with absolutely everything. Thank you, mate. And so off tonight to watch QPR Luton. Let's have a prediction.
A home win for the mighty Queen's Park Rangers.
I'm going to have a tenner for charity of your choice, that Luton beat you.
OK, well... Right.
We're doing that? The draw's invalid.
I don't want you to win that bet, clearly. I hope that your £10 will go to the bookmakers, although I'd rather it go to to the charity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, see, now you're in a really difficult position, aren't you? And after the match, say hello to Cigar on the way home and pop into your Cowpesh. Have you ever called him Cow Pat when you've had a couple or too many scoops?
Never.
Good man. That was Peter Bleksley. This is Jeremy Kyle. It's 5:23 on Talk Drive.
Peter, good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, I think we did take a lot of action in government, going right back to the 2014 report into Rotherham. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse you referred to was, of course, commissioned by a Conservative. Sajid Javid, who you and I know well, commissioned further research into it. And then, in response to that report you're referring to, Rishi Sunak established the Grooming Gangs Task Force about a year and a half ago, which led to over 550 arrests of suspected paedophiles.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Drive Time, 5:27. This is JK, the man who had flu for Christmas, real flu, and whose voice is still lasting. Joined by a man who just said, for 60, you look good, Tim Montgomery. How do I introduce you now? Former number 10 advisor, the man who, well, sort of, what do we say, moved to reform?
Well, they say defected, but defected makes you sound like sort of dodgy, doesn't it, really?
No, defecated makes you sound dodgy, doesn't it, to be honest?
By the way, I like the throaty voice.
Do you?
I know you've been through hell, but the voice is pretty good. Yeah.
I'm trying,
very husky.
I'm trying not to shout, and I'm trying to keep it there.
I like it.
On a serious note.
Don't get the wrong idea, but I like it.
Thank you very much indeed, dear. Thank you, darling. Anyway, so we saw each other at that reform party on the Thursday.
And that was the last time you were properly well?
Absolutely been ill ever since then. So I haven't had a chance to talk to you. Is it a difficult decision?
To leave... I underestimated how difficult it would be. I've joined for ideological reasons, and then I think the Conservative Party is kaput, and that's why I left. But I could deal with the people who are angry with me for leaving, but the people who are generally sad, who I've worked with over a number of years in the Conservative Party, that's actually... I underestimated how hard that would be, because listeners may not completely understand this, but a political party isn't just a political party, it's like a family. Sure. You spend an awful lot of your time with these people, on the streets, campaigning, at parties,
So
at
it's not the people who are calling you every name under the sun, it's the ones who
I can cope with that, but it's when people are genuinely sad and think, all that we built together, all that we worked together, and we won't see each other anymore. And I say, well, we still could be friends.
Does it affect friendships?
It's affected a few, but to be honest, if it's a true friendship, it doesn't affect it.
Completely.
Yeah.
So much to talk about. The obvious way to start with you, as a man who's defecated to reform. I love that. It's great.
Please stop that. Please stop that. I don't like taking
Musk.
Yeah.
I'm quite outspoken on this. Obviously, before Christmas, Mar-a-Lago, Nigel, the new treasurer, Nick Candy, the billionaire, and Musk, and then this sort of admission that there could be a massive donation up to £100 million, and the Conservatives and Labour jumping up and down saying this
always
isn't right.
a bit exaggerated.
Of course. And then you have the Tommy Robinson thing, a convicted felon who, as I think Benedict Spence put quite cleverly earlier, might ideologically be fine to some people, but will never be elected and will never be embraced because of the things that he's done. Unfortunately, that's the way the world acts. In his case, correctly in those instances. Musk has taken a little bit of that story, and suddenly overnight, Nigel says, I don't want him in my party. Most people would say that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Musk says, we need a new leader. He's not up to it. What's your response?
Well, look, Elon Musk is a brilliant man. You know, SpaceX, Telsa, Twitter. He's a great innovator. He's probably like the Da Vinci of our times.
Yeah.
You know, really brilliant man. But you see him on Twitter, X, or whatever we call it now, it's like 20 tweets every hour on all different subjects. No one, even with a massive brain, can come up with views that quickly. And so I don't know whether today he regrets his view that he expressed yesterday about Nigel Farage, but it looked a little bit to me like a rush of blood to the head. But I'm kind of
ill-informed. Nigel Farage out there is a god to many people. To many, he's not.
Yeah.
But there are millions of people in this country who believe that Nigel Farage is speaking the language that this country needs.
Well, there's what is true, Jeremy, is there's absolutely no one else who could lead reform and make them a popular force in British politics. No one else.
But let's talk about... This is really... I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. But let's talk about the next stage. So Musk would look at a Donald Trump figure who has battled assassination attempts, criminal convictions, women accusing him of all sorts of things, people calling him a convicted rapist, blah, 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 to win the popular vote in the US for the first time in 30 years. I think that's a fact.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that in this country, I suspect. I suspect in this country you can have your views that are important, but as I was saying earlier to Benedict, you would need to show yourself, would you, moderate to a degree, centrist to a degree, to get elected. Nigel absolutely is that person. We had Ben Habib on at the beginning of the show. I'd love your take on this as well. He says the problem with the party now is it's not democratised. It's Nigel Farage's private company, and anything he says goes.
Yeah.
That surely has to change, but no, there shouldn't be no doubt, should there? I think this is where Elon Musk got it right, that nobody can galvanise people politically right now the way that Nigel Farage can.
100%. And look, there are probably 2-3% of people who listen to this show who are worried about the democratisation of
What does that
reform.
mean?
Exactly. But I tell you what, and I found this yesterday. I live in Salisbury. I was in the pub last night having a few drinks with friends. And what they think about, what's holding sort of Middle England back from voting reform is the idea that somehow there's racist, there's nasty people involved. And what people noticed yesterday, you know, only a couple of people, but they noticed that Nigel Farage said no to Tommy Robinson. Now, they think Elon Musk is a bit mad. They like him, they respect him, but what they noticed was that Nigel Farage said no. You know, he stood up to Elon Musk and he said, I'm not going to have someone who's committed mortgage fraud, who's been held in contempt of court 3 times. You know, we could go on through the list of things. Tommy Robinson's got lots of things right, but he's got more wrong. And he actually jeopardised the trial of people in these grooming gangs. Let's not call them grooming gangs, let's call them raping gangs. That's what they were.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And he potentially jeopardised the trials of those people by this contempt of court. So he's, you know, like all of us, Jeremy, he's complicated.
And
he's got good and bad.
Of course.
But Nigel Farage drew a line.
Yeah.
And I think it's not a clause 4 moment for those who are old enough to remember when Tony Blair did this, but it is a moment when Nigel Farage has said to the British people, I'm not going to allow extremists to dominate my party.
Which was one, as you quite rightly said, one of the big criticisms. There were two at the last election, disorganised and a sort of rabble gathered together at the last minute. Will you stand? Can you see yourself standing?
No, I'm
You're going to be behind the scenes.
I'm like you. I know, we're people...
I was going to stand.
Not as handsome,
I thought you were going to run my campaign.
Not as handsome or throaty, but
no, thank you.
But I think we're both people who can't take lines, can we? We speak our minds, and if you're going to be a candidate for a political party, you have to toe the line, and that's not me. That's not.
Do you believe that Reform, in 4 years' time, the party that you've defected to, will be a machine capable of... I mean, this is what I think will happen, right? This is me. I think that the Labour Party will get 220 seats, the Tories will get 220 seats, and I think that Farage will get between 100 and 120.
Hold the balance of power.
I absolutely believe that will be the case. I don't believe... I think you build... But I think that the other politicians are missing the point if they don't take him seriously. Actually, the next interesting thing was Starmer hits back at Musk today, and this is all centring as well about these raping gangs. I'd love your take on this. I've been quite vocal today and in the past, probably because I'm a father of 6. If there is a cover-up, if this has come from whoever... I mean, that appalling email that's surfacing that apparently says, and I quote, you know, these children or these people made informed choices is just the most repugnant thing I've ever heard.
They couldn't. They were children.
We've had police say in the past, you know, we were worried about the cultural implications of arrests, which, again, in my world is appalling, because if you break the law, you break the bloody law and you should suffer the consequences. But what does it say as a society? And this isn't just at Starmer's door, by the way. This has been going on a long, long time. It does lead you to think that maybe there is a big bloody cover-up, but surely looking after the children is the most important, and pensioners in the world, isn't it?
Well, it should have been. And I can understand, you know, I think there were good motivations for the cover-up, in the sense that people were worried about race relations. But compared to these were vulnerable young girls. Some of the most vulnerable. They weren't, you know, middle-class kids. They didn't have families that necessarily looked after them.
But whether they're middle class or lower class or wherever they come from, aren't we as a society, as a world, supposed to protect innocent
100%,
children?
And particularly vulnerable kids who couldn't stand up for themselves. And they were left on the altar of community relations to be abused in the most, I'm going to use the word wicked way. I don't know whether you believe in darkness, Jeremy. I do believe there are demonic forces in the world.
Well, I don't...
Really evil.
I'm with you.
What these girls were you know, experienced was demonic.
I've said before and got into trouble. In my mind, people talk about rehabilitation and giving... Do you know what? There are certain people, right, like that... I nearly said the wrong word there. That man who... abused, beat, bit, burnt and fractured the bones of Sarah Sharif, that one who's in jail for 40 years. Am I allowed to say anything, or are you going to look at me? Did you read the report about him being attacked? Yeah. No comment. There are people like that, in my mind, that are so goddamn evil, they do not deserve to be at liberty or even on the earth that I frequent. I really mean that.
Do you support capital punishment?
Absolutely, 1,000,000%. And people will say to me, that's wrong. You telling me Sarah Sharif's father deserves to... People will say to me, Jez, you're going off on one, he's in prison for 40 years, that's going to be hard. I'd go, it doesn't deserve that. But what I'm trying to say about people who abuse children... any sort of cover-up is repugnant to me. Well, and I think, and I wonder whether Benedict is right, that this goes so high into so many different parts of society that it's just swept under the carpet, which is a disgrace, because we live in a world where all the liberals jump up and down and say, oh, what about that person getting a right? Or, hold on a minute, kids? Do you know what I mean?
One of the things that I was very struck with at the end of lockdown was, you know, Nicola Sturgeon, who was basically one of the big defenders of lockdown.
Jimmy Cranky.
Yeah.
Just being honest.
You are bad. But what turned her was the level of abuse of children taking place in the homes. And I think we underestimate, you know, just in the normal sort of abuse, if you want to, in inverted commas. But this was a different level.
So, final subject.
What a happy subject we're discussing tonight.
There's nothing happy, and this is going to get worse, because this, for me, is I mean, have you read this today? The government has opened the door to scrapping free prescriptions for the over 60s to raise more money for the NHS. So, again, you were a number...
against pensioners?
You were a number 10 advisor. So here's what we're now saying.
Yeah.
If we don't freeze you to death, right? No, we're laughing, but it's a fact.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure that you can't afford the medicine that will keep you well. And guess what? You'll be back in the bloody hospital, which is absolute... How does that make sense, Tim?
It doesn't. It doesn't. But
it's just beyond me, man.
I think when the history of this Labour government is written, and it's we're 10% into the government. Goodness knows what they're going to do in the rest of the 90% of the time that they've got. But I honestly believe that the abolition of the winter fuel allowance will be remembered as on their tombstone. You know, the fact
poll tax moment for them.
Yeah, absolutely, because it was never heralded in the manifesto. They didn't say they were going to do this. It was there in the middle. They didn't. You know, it wasn't like pain was being widely distributed. It was pensioners.
And it's almost as if, and when you heard that they admitted that 4,000 pensioners would die of the cold this winter, when you then think about prescriptions and you think about, in my mind, how much pensioners have given to society and what they've done and the stamp, I mean, it's disgraceful. But I'm very much with you. I don't understand, and you were an advisor, how somebody has not got the nuts or the intelligence to go, we're never going to be forgiven for this. No. And here's the thing, and this is pure reform policy, and I completely agree with Nigel on this. Foreign aid budget, I did a thing before Christmas. If you cut it by 5%, 5%, the 13 billion, so that's 1 point. That'd pay for the money you're apparently saving by freezing 4,000 pensioners to death. Doesn't make sense, does it?
No. Well, look, I support a foreign aid budget when the hungriest and the sickest people in the world, we should be able to help them.
Absolutely.
Because we are a lucky country compared to most people.
But I also want to look after my pensioners.
But that's a third of the aid budget.
There you go.
You know.
Absolutely. An absolute legend. Always good to have you. Tim Montgomery, 53, young and full of it out.
54, I'm afraid.
54 out in Salisbury having a drink. He'll be on regularly. Thank you, Tim. Happy New Year to you. Talk Drive, 20 to 6. We're coming back. Don't go anywhere.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Back 18 minutes to 6 o'clock. Thank you for all your messages. Trying not to shout, trying to make sure we get to the end of the show. Talk, the gentleman with the gruff London voice. That'll be Peter Bleksley, who was talking to Jeremy Carr between 5 and 5:30 this evening, spoke extremely well as how we, the British people, think he needs to team up with Mr Farage. Patricia, thank you very much indeed. A very good evening to Donna in Birmingham. Donna says, great show, Jez. I love Peter. He should go into politics and kick those idiots up the arse. We need people like him who speak out with fear and state the bleeding obvious. I appreciate that. Stephen, good evening. Jez, in my opinion, sex offenders do not offend just once. The UK government should fast-track migrant sex offenders and deport them immediately. Which organisation, local or international, could argue against it, and who cares about them anyway? Bill's from Romsey. Hello, Bill. How are you? Happy New Year, me old son. What would have happened if you... interesting. Gonna say it. He says, Bill in Romsey, what would have happened if this had been a gangs of white men raping Muslim girls? Do you think we'd have waited 8 years for justice? Possibly not. I don't know. Jez, 60-year-olds are not pensioners. No, I'm not a pensioner. Most are working. Yes, I am. And if not, are on benefits. No, I'm not, so don't pay anything anyway. You should pay for your prescriptions until you're 60. I do pay for my... You see, my voice usually would have gone higher, and I've got angry, but I'm learning. I'm trying to keep it. It does. I will pay for it. JK, you will qualify for your free prescription when you are 60. That doesn't make any sense. The other bloke says I won't. Could you find out when I'll get a free prescription, please, Ryan? That would be nice. Hello to Cliff in Berkshire. JK, I suppose the over 60s reforms of prescriptions will only apply to England. My wife and I are pensioners. I have 14 medications and she has 10. The NHS will only issue 28 days' worth at a time. It would be like having a mortgage again, and we would really, really struggle. Please keep those texts coming, 87222. Start the message with the word talk. Ryan, the producer who has taken me really from the back streets of nowhere and got me back on national radio, has just said, you will get it on July the 8th when you are 60. I don't want to make this year about me being 60, but Jode, I am worried. I don't feel 60. I still want to wear combat... Joking, what? What are you going to get? Brilliant. They're going to get me a free prescription for my birthday. I can't believe it, but you know what day July the 7th is this year? Have you looked in your diary? Have a look and let me know. What day is July the 7th? 0344 419 1000 is the telephone number. Text to 87222. Start your message with the word talk. What day is it? It's a bleeding Monday. I'm going to be here on the day that I'm 60. Let's go to Hertfordshire. Andrew, you're on Talk Drive. A very good evening. 2 minutes. What you got, my friend?
Good evening. Happy New Year. Do a great job.
Thank you, my friend.
In relation to your cold, get some warm lemonade, about half a pint, 4 large scotches, and some honey. Drink it. The hangover it gives you will take your mind off your cold.
It's not a cold, and it's not man flu. It's been proper flu. But don't worry about it. I'll deal with it. It's fine. Andrew in Hertfordshire, what you got, my friend?
So Musk, if you think about it, Dominic said he's not over English politics or British politics. He actually is better informed than you or I or anybody in the UK because he has a platform, so he can see who is a reform voter who also likes Tommy Robinson or that abhorrent individual, or who has viewed a video of his. And he can see exactly what type of people they are. So when he's going to invest his money, like any American, he wants to make sure that his money actually has a return on it. So he's hunting down ways to influence reform so he gets a return on any money he puts in it. And remember, we can't see what he can see. The only people that could see it are your marketing team when they buy statistics off of Google or they buy them off of X.
Is he right or wrong? Is Nigel Farage the man to lead reform?
Oh, 100%. But and you have to get this in perspective. He stood up to Musk. Robinson has no place. This is the way forward.
Really appreciate your call, Andrew. We're not going to cut to it. Just to let you know, the Labour Party, as ever, behind the 8 ball. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is standing in the Commons as we speak, speaking on child sexual exploitation. This is, she's got Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, next to her. This is as a result of many people now calling for a public inquiry into the child grooming problems in Oldham and Rochdale and Rotherham. But we've heard on this show today, this is far deeper, goes far greater. This is a story that quite rightly is going nowhere. Your thoughts on that? 0344 419 1000. We'll head north to Liverpool. Kevin, you're on Talk Drive. Couple of minutes. What you got, my friend?
Yes, Happy New Year to you.
And you, my friend.
Peter is an absolute legend. He talks so much sense every time I hear that man. Honestly, he's an absolute star for a southerner. Anyway, But talking about these grooming gangs, I mean, I'm now 53 years old. I mean, from me being 12 years old, you know, there were young girls on from an impoverished estate. And the young girls, you know, off our estate, you know, they were there, they're turning up with new trainers on and clothes and cigarettes and this, that and the other. And we all know where they were coming from, you know. And this isn't just happening in Preston. This is happening in all these sorts of towns and everything else. And this has been going on a very long time. And nobody has done nothing about it.
Why do you think, very briefly, why do you think that is?
Well, purely and simply because of racial tension and problems.
Well, I'll tell you something, and many people, Kevin, thank you for your call in Liverpool, many people are saying, Benedict Spence said it, is it a cover-up? Is it an institutional cover-up? In my mind, any abuse of any child, boy or girl, male or female, is fundamentally wrong. As a society, we should protect children, as Peter Bleksley quite rightly said. And I think if you break the law, you break the law. And I don't think it's about the colour of your skin or your religion or anything. Yvette Cooper, as I say, is speaking in the House of Commons now about grooming gangs. This is an abhorrence that is not going to go away, and we will watch and follow closely on Talk. It's 11 minutes to 6. This is JK on Drive.
Peter, good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, I think we did take a lot of action in government, going right back to the 2014 report into Rotherham. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse you referred to was, of course, commissioned by a Conservative. Sajid Javid, who you and I know well, commissioned further research into it. And then, in response to that report you're referring to, Rishi Sunak established the Grooming Gangs Task Force about a year and a half ago, which led to over 550 arrests of suspected paedophiles.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Back 8 minutes to 6, and despite the fact that I am barely able to speak, I feel like celebrating like you wouldn't believe. Push the sports bed, please.
Sport Summary on Talk.
A very, very, very happy new year to one of the finest sports broadcasters I know. How are you, Sam Ellard? I've been ill. Thank you for not even responding to my messages to you from my sickbed for 3 weeks. I want to keep my voice calm, but I've got the biggest smile on my face, and I'll let you talk for 8 minutes and tell my 5 viewers and listeners why I'm so bloody happy this Monday.
Yeah, hi, I'm good, thanks. My Christmas, New Year was good. I didn't know you were unwell, but yeah, that throat sounds a little bit, that's a bit dodgy. I think maybe Alex Phillips could be getting a call up tomorrow. But you're a happy man, Jeremy. You've been predicting this and wanting this for the last couple of weeks. But I think we're genuinely getting close to this now. Lots of rival journalists have reported the West Ham are on the verge of finally sacking Julian Lopetegui, and it's looking likely there's going to be great...
Push that button now! Push the button! Yes! The voice is going, I've got to keep quiet.
It's looking likely that it could be Graham Potter, Jeremy, that comes in as manager, maybe on a temporary basis short term, but West Ham are 14th in the table. They've had heavy defeats in their past 2 matches. Now Tim Steiten, who's the technical director, there's been stories that he's staying away from the club's training grounds. Look, let's be honest, ever since Lopetegui's come in, after getting off to a really tricky start, it's felt like he's been up against it from the get-go. You're 14th in the table, you're conceding lots of goals, you're losing matches heavily, lots of your big players are not playing very well. I think Moyes leaving, the main reason why fans wanted Moyes to go, you'll know this obviously, is you wanted a new manager to come in.
I didn't.
Attractive style of play. But what's interesting is the new manager's come in and it hasn't felt like there's been any change of the style.
I said to you some months ago, what happens is, it happened with Pellegrini, oh, Moyes is boring, and then that was a disaster, you spend 100 million quid. Whether I think David Moyes plays the right football or not, right? There's probably only 3 or 4 or 5 clubs that are going to be able to play that sort of football. This is business. And if you gave me, as a West Ham fan, 6th, 6th, 7th, and a European victory, whatever you say about the conversation, David Moyes is treated ridiculously badly by West Ham. He is a fantastic manager who should never... I said it. Lopetegui, not bothered. Walked out of Wolves, lasted for 5 minutes in Spain. I don't understand, by the way, Potter as a temporary thing. I want Graham Potter on a long-term contract. I think Graham Potter is absolutely the right person. Why only temporary? What's that all about?
Yeah, so that I completely agree with you there. I find the kind of, maybe getting... I find the short-term thing kind of strange.
What's that about?
He's definitely the right... I agree with you, by the way, in terms of Potter.
But if you give him a full-time contract, he's got no Jarrod Bowen, Paqueta's about to go to jail, I suspect, for 10 years or whatever's going to happen with him. You've got to say to him, you're the man, mould something here. You've got to... Potter's absolutely right.
And I think it's interesting, there's a lot of time away from the game. Especially Chelsea didn't go very, very well. But what's important, I think we shouldn't forget about the Chelsea stint. There was a basket case club for a couple of years. Everyone was failing there. His work at Brighton, in terms of what he did with Brighton, the progressive football, good recruitment, taking them up the table. You look at Brighton kind of a year ago, they were playing in the Europa League quarter-final. That's where you were at, right? I think Potter's the right man to get you back to that level. I think it's been messy in terms of bringing a new manager, giving him lots of money to spend, sacking him 6 months in. But I do think Graham Potter's a really good coach, and I think that'd be a good appointment for West Ham.
That's this big game over the weekend. I mean, Amorim was already getting the Manchester United manager, the saviour, was getting grief from the press. Liverpool, Man United, sort of watched it in between, feeling crap. Ended up 2-2. Everybody from a Man United perspective saying, that's brilliant, that's fantastic. The manager going, actually, that's quite disappointing. We should have done that from the beginning. Liverpool still get a draw. Manchester United, 15th in the table. I mean, frightening, man, isn't it?
I mean, you're level on points with Man United, Jeremy. There we go. Man United and West Ham in a relegation battle. Look, I think yesterday's game, it felt like going into it, the only debate was how many Liverpool going to score. Could they get 6s? Could they get 7s? And look, Man United have taken lots of stick over the past couple of weeks.
Quite rightly.
But let's give them some credit where credit's due, because that was a really good performance yesterday.
Just one.
Say again?
Just one performance, and everybody's going, oh, it's 100%.
Great. Listen, Jeremy, look, oh my goodness me, there is so much they've got such a far distance to go to get to where they want to get to. But look, yesterday might at least give Amorim something that's what they can do. They defended really well in the first half, and then to fair in the second half, they gave as good as they got. Yeah. They put people under pressure. They had the best chance to win the game right at the end, Harry Maguire. And do you know what? And listen, this should be the bare minimum, of course. for any professional football team, especially when you're playing for Man United. But they showed a little bit of hunger yesterday, a little bit of desire. Too often over the past couple of weeks and months and years, they're easy to bully, they're easy to play against. They went to Anfield against the best team in the league, and they dug in.
It's got to be the template, right? It's got to be the template.
100%, exactly that. It's got to be a template, exactly that. It's a start, but of course, there's so much more they got to do, Man United.
There are women the length and breadth of this country that love Sam's predictions. It's a new part of the show. Wolverhampton Wanderers against Nottingham Forest tonight. Nottingham Forest, talk about an amazing season, third in the Premiership at the moment, doing amazing things, OK? Amazing things. Wolverhampton Wanderers get this new guy in, completely unheard. He's had 2 victories, I think, and a draw. I'm going to stick my neck on the line. Wolves, home win against Nottingham Forest tonight.
Well, Jeremy, I'm famously on your show. I'm yet to get a prediction right, and I've been doing this for about a year now. So let's go against the grey. Nottingham Forest, the team in form. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Nottingham Forest winner, a late Chris Wood goal. Wolves 0, Forest 1.
OK, and just very quickly for you, how was Christmas in the Ellard household? Did your mother like the thing I gave her?
No, she didn't like it. She didn't even mention it. Christmas was great. We went round to Auntie Deborah. She did a wonderful Christmas meal. Lots of pigs in blankets. They were terrific. We did Secret Santa. Uncle Warwick did a quiz. New Year was quiet. Didn't do a great deal on New Year, but it's a new year, and I'm looking forward to 2025. Looking forward to being on your wonderful show.
Now is the year.
Jeremy, you sound awful, by the way, mate.
Mate, this is good for me.
You sound awful.
Well, that's
you sound like you. Do you want me to host the final hour of the show? I can do it here on Zoom. I'll get my mates on from TalkSport. Alex Phillips will come in. We'll tackle the big.
Why do you keep mentioning Alex Phillips? She's got a boyfriend. Stop trying to get in there.
Saying, when you're off and she fills in, she's brilliant, Jess. Brilliant.
Of course she's brilliant. That's why she fills in. She's the future. I'm 60 this year and I'm the past. Listen, serious thing. Andy Goldstein's a bugger. That man from TalkSport on Drive comes up to me and said, you know about Lopetegui's been sacked? And then he tells me I'm getting Eric Ten Hag, and I told everybody. And then he sent me a message going, winding you up.
Oh.
Sammy Ellard, we love you. We'll have you on after the news at 6. Thank you very much indeed. News is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Just gone at 6 o'clock. This is JK on Drive on Talk, of course, the home of free speech and common sense. Into the third hour of Drive for Monday. Ahead, of course, Kevin O'Sullivan, the man who wasn't it. I mean, he went somewhere quite glamorous for Christmas. I'm expecting a heavily tanned, chiselled human being to walk into the studio, or rather run in late at about 2 minutes to 7. Loads to get on between now and 7 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is our telephone number. Text to 87222. Rob, the medic, is that right? Regarding Ben Habib, Jez, earlier, he may speak clearly, and there's obviously been some behind-the-scene disagreements. However, Farage's judgment, again, is reliable, and I'm pretty fed up of people, especially Ben, showing his true colours by constantly attacking and criticising Farage and Reform in a destructive way. This is not going to do us any favours. Amanda, Jez, it saddens me greatly that Ben Habib has turned his back on Reform UK. He's a Reform man through and through and harms the party by throwing things at us. Dave in Leicester, great show as always. Nigel calls Musk a hero. The truth is Ben Habib is a hero. What a diamond. Thank you. Ginny is in Southend. So they're doing away with free prescriptions for the over 60s now, and the illegal immigrants and criminals and terrorists are still getting everything on the NHS or free. I'm truly lost for words as you are, Jezza. Get well soon. Great to have you back. Brilliant. And this from Tango. Actually, the response to this is I have been tangoed. Ready for this, Jez? A fail-safe flu remedy for you. Never heard this one before. Mash up half an apple. Add a complete clove of garlic and lemon zest. Pour in 2 tablespoonfuls of Bisto, some milk and gently blend. Heat this mixture in a pan for 5 minutes and let it cool. Then throw the bleeding lot out the window and get drunk on whiskey. Tango in it. I think I have been tango, but thank you very much indeed. 0344 499 1000, text to 87222. We will get you on, but at 6:05. I believe, a little bird told me, my next guest has also been quite poorly. Talk's international editor, we say Happy New Year to Isabelle Oakshott. Hello.
Hi. So I've got a question for you. Do you consider yourself a sympathetic man or not really?
Now, my wife would say, this is very interesting, right, because I got this, I had this, I think I might have given it to you because I gave you a goodnight kiss at that party. Did you end up ill? I think I did.
Thanks.
I'm just being...
I can honestly say I have never been as unwell in my whole life. I can still, you might not be able to hear it your end, but I can still hear it in my voice. And this is nearly 2 weeks now.
It's not, it's 3.
Totally wrote off Christmas and New Year. And I tell you this, and all our female listeners who have children will relate to this. When you're a mum, you cannot malfunction at Christmas. That is not an option. So feeling like absolute death, I had to try to put on some kind of brave face on it on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, Boxing Day, you know, functioning like some kind of... I mean, it was deathly. If you and I had the same thing, you know how bad this was.
Well, I don't want to turn this into this, but I'm being completely honest with you. I came to that party, gave you a kiss, went home. I had a temperature, the chills, I had the doctors. On Christmas Day, if you'd offered me hospital, I'd have taken it. I had sores all over my mouth.
Right?
You see, I spoke to Mr. Oakshott, who said, Isabelle's got the lurgy. Was he not sympathetic then, the next chance of the Exchequer?
Oh, he actually also got it, but it wasn't quite as bad as mine. But I tell you, your worst crime, Jeremy, is that it's actually felled my little girl, and she has been in bed for nearly 5 days now. And you know what kids are like. They don't do being in bed. No. You know, they bounce off the walls after about half a day.
So I'm being blamed by you for giving it to you?
You literally took the responsibility. Anyway, I guess we better move on, but I'm so glad that I've actually found the culprit, because there's been a lot of speculation about who and how did I get this thing.
Told you about kissing me to make your boyfriend jealous. It just ends up with all sorts of trouble, Isabelle Oakshott, doesn't it? Welcome, welcome. Happy New Year. We're both hopefully getting there. I'm the same with my voice. Where do you want to start? Let's start with the obvious one. Elon Musk. I mean, the problem I've got with this is, because he's so up and down, there's always going to be that moment. And, of course, much was said before Christmas about Elon Musk, Mar-a-Lago, Nigel Farage, the picture. He's going to make this donation. It's going to turn everybody, you know, to realise that Reform could be the next government. And then because Nigel, I think quite rightly, says, I don't want Tommy Robinson in the Reform Party. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's the right look. He sends this message saying Reform needs a new leader. He should be ousted. He's not up to. What's your response, Isabelle?
Well, the truth is that I was really quite shocked. You know, this just came out of the blue yesterday, didn't it? And I initially thought, has his account been hacked? I mean, he actually owns X, so presumably his account can't be hacked. But that was my initial reaction. And then actually, the more I've thought about it, the more I realised this is his personality and this was always going to happen.
Yeah.
And it will happen with Trump as well. He will turn on Trump at some point, possibly sooner than later. And there is an argument that it's better that this has happened early for Reform than that relationship continued to build over a period of time and then Musk suddenly turned on the party leadership. In a sense, it's meaningless. You know, Nigel Farage is going absolutely nowhere. And there's nobody that I'm aware of within the Reform Party that thinks that Nigel Farage is not a strong enough leader. I mean, you can accuse him of many things, but lacking strength is not one of those. And I know we've had Ben Habib on today. I actually didn't hear the interview just now. And I love Ben, you know, I've got great respect for him, but I do think it's time he got back in his box on this and other anti-reform stuff.
He keeps going on about democratisation. He makes...
It's getting boring now. It really is.
He will say that that he is you know, essentially it's his private party and that's the way it is. But that's Ben Habib to one side. Can I put to you that I mean, you make a really good point that you know, it's his personality. Was it a misjudgment to align yourself that close, for example, to not you, the party, to somebody who is always going to be like that? Is it... I mean, I think he's dead right about Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage. I think it's absolutely spot on. There will be people who disagree with me and say Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner. Tommy Robinson has broken the law on several occasions. If Reform is not going to be looked at as some right-wing rabble, racist mess of whatever that people said before, certain difficult decisions have to be made. But what other people are saying, which is what I want your response to, is don't lose all your beliefs or your values and become too centrist and moderate just to be elected. And I think that's probably what we can take from this without going down the Elon Musk route. Do you know what I mean?
It's such a difficult balance for a political party like Reform because, of course, you know, let me give you an example. I think the party would probably like to be more radical. It's just me speculating on deporting illegal immigrants. You know, many of the party's supporters continually push for mass deportation.
Yep.
I think I'd like to see mass deportation personally, but for the party leadership to call for it, you know, they run the risk of being accused of being unrealistic, you know, of being very extreme and so on. So it's always a really difficult balance to get between the things that you might like to say and, you know, your better wisdom, your better judgment of going too far. And I understand that people want a party to be true to itself, but being Tommy Robinson-like is not true to where...
So if that was good judgment, to say no to Tommy Robinson by Nigel and the leadership, was it bad judgment to get close to and be advocating the brilliance of a man who is at best completely unpredictable, and Elon Musk? That's a relevant question, I think.
So I wouldn't have said that as any kind of misjudgment. For a start, I'm not sure that the Reform leadership kind of engineered this as such. I mean, the whole thing about a huge donation was very much whipped up by lots of people who thought it would be a great story. And it is a great story, and it might yet happen. I mean, we know this because we had on Talk earlier today on Mike Graham's show, we had Elon Musk's father, who said, well, look, a donation is still very much on the table. So I don't think it was a mistake for Nigel Farage to meet Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago. That happened quite organically, I think, on the night of the election. And I don't think it's a mistake to say, look, I think it's brilliant that Elon Musk is taking such a close interest in British politics. You don't have to agree with everything he says to in some way be pleased that he thinks we've still got something worth fighting for in this country. And he and his father are clearly very keen on the UK, and they're worried by what they see is happening to the UK. And almost all of us across the political divide can share that. So if the world's richest man wants to get stuck in, well, he might be kicking all of us. You know, he's kicking Jess Phillips, he's kicking Keir Starmer, he's having a go at Nigel. Next, maybe it's going to be Kemi Badenoch. We've just got to get used to this being the way the guy rolls. Personally, and I'm sure he has many PR advisors and doesn't need to listen to any of them, I would say that his tweeting would be more powerful if he did less of it, you know, just a bit more.
Very interesting. If just very quickly from Mick, I'd love your response to this, Isabelle. Musk is acting like a rich Bond villain, and Ben Habib has become a typical political backstabber and should be ashamed. But what I'd like to see, says Mick, is Rupert Lowe, the great Yarmouth Reform MP, who Musk was saying is fantastic. I'd like him to endorse Nigel today. Surely that's the right thing to do.
Well, Rupert Lowe put out a statement yesterday making it very clear that he is totally loyal to Nigel. There is no question on this planet of Rupert Lowe taking over from Nigel Farage. I can't imagine that will ever happen. Of course, if Nigel Farage were to fall by the wayside of his own volition at some point in the distant future, you know, who knows who might take over. But at no point in foreseeable future is there any place for anyone to replace Nigel Farage. This is a man who has brought the party to its most exciting point yet.
Before I talk to you about some domestic stuff, there's a reason I keep looking up, because there's a very ironic moment going on in Washington at 1:14 as Kamala Harris, who looks like she's got vinegar under her nostrils, oversees the certification of Donald Trump's election victory, and she keeps having papers passed her and going, ooh, like that, oof, oof. Let's quit that and ask you about the news earlier. Justin Trudeau, Canadian Prime Minister for the last 9 years, announcing his resignation. They asked me to sum it up. I went, great. Another liberal lefty wokist disappears into thin air. We're the only country left with a socialist, a woke socialist in front now, aren't we? I mean, all of Europe's going to the right. He's disappeared before Trump arrives.
Well, and we're working on it, aren't we, to replace what we've got. I think everyone realises that we made a colossal mistake earlier this year in what we've put into power. But on Trudeau, I mean, I'm so glad to see the back of that guy. Yeah. I've never forgiven him for his behaviour during the pandemic. Don't forget, this is a guy who literally used the powers of the state to freeze the bank accounts of people who protested against the vaccine mandate. You know, the behaviour of the Canadian regime during the pandemic was right up there with the most repressive on the planet. And he was right in the front and spearheading that. And I thought it was extraordinary that today, as he talked of his proudest moments, his handling of the pandemic, which was an absolute unforgivable disgrace, was one of the 2 or 3 things that he mentioned that he had done well. Well, no, you didn't, and I'm glad to see the back of you.
Right, that's America, that's Canada, and that's Musk. We're gonna shoot through these because I know exactly what my good friend who I gave flu to thinks. The government, this wonderful Labour government, today opened the door, Isabelle, to scrapping free prescriptions for the over 60s to raise much-needed funds for the NHS. And again, because I don't have your intelligence or your way with words, to me, I thought about this. So if they don't freeze pensioners to death, they make sure they can't afford to get the medicines that'll make them better, so those pensioners will end up back in hospital, putting more pressure on the NHS and costing more money. These people are nuts, aren't they?
I mean, I just wonder if they've got a political death wish.
Yeah.
How is it that they keep making these colossal misjudgments? I mean, tinker around with all sorts of other things, but don't stop free prescriptions for the over 60s. You know, I'm pretty hard line on, you know, the waste in the NHS, areas where you could absolutely run a red line through so much of what the NHS does and doesn't do and save billions of pounds. But I wouldn't actually scrap this one small thing that is really quite essential for older people. I mean, if you have to start paying for prescriptions, it does add up quite significantly.
It's unbelievable. Other news today, this would be your favourite. Foreign nationals are more than 3 times more likely than people from Great Britain to be arrested for sexual offences. 3 times more. So foreign criminals are 3 times more likely to commit sexual offences. So it begs the question, why don't we just close our borders and make it less easy for people to come to this country? How many times have we had this chat, for goodness sake?
And why don't we start deporting the ones that do this stuff before they get a chance to be repeat offenders? And it's great that we're beginning to get some of this information, because I know, because I've been privy to multiple attempts on freedom of information to actually get the breakdown of crimes committed and convictions by nationality, that it's really hard to get the government to admit this stuff. They really, really don't want us to know. And it's exactly that kind of attitude of cover-up that has led to the completely heartbreaking, scandalous, enormous scale abuse in those northern towns, which have caused so much...
Not just northern towns, it seems. Let's be honest. Not just northern towns. Had somebody on from Peterborough today. We had somebody on from somewhere else. I mean, I wanted to finish by asking you about that, and I don't understand. And I had Benedict on earlier. I had Poppy Coburn on earlier. Here's the thing. You're a mother, I'm a father, OK? There are now feelings amongst certain people emanating about this email at the weekend that said that, you know, certain people in power in 2008 said the right approach to this is to say these girls made informed choices. Now, whether this is a cover-up or not, if you are raped by a gang member, whatever your age, but these were kids, fundamentally and morally, that is so abhorrent to me as a parent. How does any politician, Isabelle, whether it was 20 years ago or not, think that they are going to get away with sending directives or heads of the police or whoever it is that this is acceptable? Does somebody not, as Peter Bleksley, think that somebody somewhere has kept, if this email exists, but more than that, if this is a cover-up, what does that say of us as a country? If we saw that in another country, we would be up in arms, the United Kingdom, saying that this was disgraceful and should change. Do you believe there's been a systematic cover-up of child abuse in the United Kingdom?
Yes, I do. And I must admit that, you know, obviously I've been aware of this story for years, and I've never really wanted to engage with it. There's so many stories as a journalist that you can really start digging deep into. And this is one that I just couldn't really bear it, really. But I've kind of made myself read some of it in the last few days. And honestly, I can't get some of it out of my head. It is so utterly astonishing, isn't it? And
why would people cover that up, though? I'm talking from a moral point of view. Why would anybody think that's acceptable? I don't get that.
Nobody thinks it's acceptable. What all this comes down to is utter cowardice, and it's the same old theme. And I tell you, it's the same old theme. Oh, we can't say this, we can't say that, because, you know, that might be taken to be racist. Well, all these people that are continually shouting and shrieking about racism, every time anyone says anything about anyone that isn't a white British, you know, national, they have this on their shoulders too. Because it is that culture that shuts down any criticism of anyone of a different racial background, ethnicity, whatever terminology you want to use. That is what has contributed to this cover-up and an ongoing cover-up. And there are, I'm afraid, still hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in this country who have been part of this culturally.
I mean, and I find that astonishing. People, you're right. People will say, by saying what you're saying, Jez, are you being racist? By saying, what is the fact that it took 8 years for British Pakistani men in Rotherham and Rochdale to be brought to justice for raping young white English girls? I got sent a text earlier. I read it out. Certain people went, whoa, on text. Would we have waited 8 years if white men had been raping Muslim girls? I don't care which way round that is. For me, the truth is that if we do not look after, for example, pensioners and children, what are we as a society, Isabelle? That's what I'm saying. I think it's disgusting, and I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, Yvette Cooper's been in the Commons just now. This is going to go on, and I think it could go to the very top. I really do. I really do.
I think it could, and I hope it does, because ultimately, You know, we know what position Keir Starmer was in for many
Yep.
years, and he must have known something about quite a bit of this. And the scale of it is truly jaw-dropping. And, you know, we've seen how quickly our law enforcement and courts can act when they get a directive from the top saying, shut this down, you know.
Far right, get them all off the streets. Absolutely.
Yeah. How come they were so quick and efficient and brutal and draconian on that? You know, a few tweets, a bit on social media, you go to jail for a few years, but, I don't know, rape a few young girls and, you know, it's all kind of, well, let's just brush that under the carpet.
Disgraceful. Listen, it is always a pleasure. I'm slightly concerned that you are blaming me for giving you flu now. Am I forgiven or not?
Absolutely not. You've got a lot of ground to make up.
Was Richard sympathetic to you?
Yeah, he was quite good, actually, to be fair.
My wife said, I've been very sympathetic, and when I get it, you just think the whole world's going to end, don't you? I think she's probably right, to be honest. Men are terrible, aren't they? Isabelle, Happy New Year. Hope you get better soon. Thank you so much indeed. 6:23, we're live across the UK. This is JK on Drive. If you want to be on between now and 7, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
basically saying what he thinks and saying it was unfiltered. He said it about his own car in terms of Tesla before when the stock prices drastically dropped. He said negative things about his own company, his own people, multiple times. He did it once on a Joe Rogan podcast. So it's quite Elon Musk-like behaviour in terms of just speaking his thoughts. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think Reform obviously needs to just stay strong as a political party and almost be like, thank you, you know, you're doing amazing work, but we are going to govern how we decide to govern.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
26 minutes past 6. Really, really quickly, I want to skip to Colton Pra, a national reporter for CTV News in Canada, Canada's 24-hour news network. Colton, welcome to Talk Drive. How are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me.
I know you've got to be out really quickly. I just love your response from Canada. Justin Trudeau today, the Prime Minister, announcing his resignation. Many people across the world going, the woke Liberals done a runner before Donald Trump arrives in the White House. Your take, my friend?
I think this has been a long time coming for the Prime Minister. He's been under pressure internally from his own party for several months now. But what we saw about 3 weeks ago was his finance minister and deputy prime minister suddenly quit cabinet when he tried to oust her. And that was a breaking point for this government. There was so much internal revolt from his own caucus that while he still sees himself, I think, as the right person to lead negotiations with Trump, to fight off a very strong, popular conservative opponent, Pierre Poilievre, he's realizing he doesn't have the caucus support to do so. And so things finally hit a breaking point today. He will resign as leader. He will resign as prime minister, but only after an interim leader has been picked. And that's where the real challenge is, because as you mentioned, there's the Trump tariff threat. There's a prorogation of parliament until the end of March or so. And the picking of that interim leader is likely going to take longer than this government has. So we could end up in a situation where the government falls and there's still not an interim prime minister or a Liberal leader. It's a disaster here for the Liberal Party, but this is the start of a shift that's been called for by many of its members for months now. Just
very, very quickly, I know you've got to go, but across the world, those sort of liberal views, if you look at Trump and you look at how Europe's moving, is moving away from this net. I mean, the only country in the world that's got it wrong at the moment is the United Kingdom. Do you think there's a seismic change? You talk about his party. He's massively unpopular with the Canadian people, though, isn't he, if we're honest?
Yeah, there's a growing populist movement around the world, and finding the best way to unlock that populism right now is being succeeded mostly via conservative parties. You know, there are Labour parties in Canada who previously dominated that vote and haven't been able to do so. It's the movement that the Liberal Party is trying to get to. They're trying to get back to that vote, talking about middle-class prosperity, but really you're hearing their opponents talk about the working class, and that's the denomination. That's the understanding that we've seen take really everywhere across the world. They've made that understanding, and it really started with Trump, I think, in 2016.
I really, really appreciate your time. I know we came to you late. Thank you very much indeed. Colton Pra, national reporter for CTV News. 6:30, we go to the phone lines. Claudia, Claude, brilliant. Well done for writing. I wrote that wrong. Claude's in Surrey. Claude, you're on Talk Drive. How are you?
Hi, I'm okay. I'm glad that Elon Musk is speaking for the people of Britain.
Right. What does that mean?
Well, I think Nigel Farage is not a fit-for-purpose leader for the Reform UK.
Why is that?
Well, we don't have a deal. And ideally, we were supposed to have a proper Brexit deal, and we've ended up having a vaccine deal, and we've become more of a society where the left is having more control in the fact of basically Brexit not being delivered and it being watered down by the Remainers. This is a big issue, and this is why we have so many scandals and not British values.
So you're saying that Nigel Farage, although he is really loved by millions, isn't strong enough to go that final extra furlong and do those things. I mean, this was said to me earlier. Somebody said the danger is to get elected in this country. You need to find some sort of moderation and centrist view. You fear that Nigel... Put it another way. You're supporting a man, Elon Musk, who probably looks at Donald Trump, although he'll probably fall out with him in a minute, because that's the way he is. Donald Trump was... there were assassination attempts, there were criminal convictions, there were women saying left, right and centre. He's now apparently civilly a rapist, according to somebody online. Does Farage need to be stronger, then, in your mind, to rid this country of what's going on?
I think so.
And who's the person, then, if it's not Nigel Farage?
There are other candidates within Reform.
Who?
I think Rupert.
That'd be ridiculous. Rupert Lowe is a nice man. Rupert Lowe does not have the connection between the British public and himself that Nigel Farage has.
But he has bold ideas, and apparently he has ideas that are kind of being acknowledged as...
You sound like you're just listening to Elon Musk, though, with that opinion. What ideas does Rupert Lowe have? Just tell them to me.
Well, apparently he's written some ideas which basically we could be going in a better direction with Brexit. And basically, I think it's the fact that we need to protect our sovereignty. We also need to ensure that we have a proper deal with international countries.
I think you'll find that Nigel Farage... I guess the difficulty, Claude, and I'm being straight with you here, is the point that I just made. I voted Reform, and I unashamedly have admitted that. I grew up in a Conservative household. I know I've said this a lot and I apologise, but there's a reason for saying it. Where it was about fiscal responsibility. You didn't buy what you couldn't afford. You had a strong army. You had strong police on the streets. You had a social, you had a justice system that if you did wrong, you broke the law, you went to prison. We seemingly live in quite a wet society nowadays. I think Nigel Farage has to be very careful, but I do think he has to be. I think he's being as strong as he can be, but I certainly appreciate your call. Thank you so much indeed. That's Claude in Surrey. Just gone 6:30. Ryan is rushing me today. It's very, very... This is a man, by the way. By the way, the producer of this show, guess what he asked for Christmas from his wife? Oven gloves. Can you imagine how exciting they have? What an exciting life. I met Mrs. Ryan, by the way, before Christmas. He is definitely punching. This is Talk Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 25 to 7. We're live across the UK. This is JK on Drive. On Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Don't forget, Kev O'Sullivan, from his holiday sunbed, is returning to the airwaves from 7 o'clock. If you want to be on ahead of that, 0344 499 1000. The voice is still lasting. We're delighted to be joined now by Greg Stafford, a Conservative MP for Farnham and Borden and a member of the Health and Social Care Select Committee. Greg, a very good evening. How are you?
Jeremy, nice to speak to you. Thanks for having me.
You're a very rare person. You're a Conservative MP. You're not. You got back. Well done, my friend.
Thanks. Well, I mean, if you're playing MP bingo, you get double points for a new Conservative MP. Definitely.
There you are. Double points for Greg. On a serious note, much to ask you. Always good to get everybody's point of view. Before we talk about Labour and free prescriptions, which sent me through the roof, I want the camera on your face because I want to see whether you smile. How did the Conservative Party and you respond to Elon Musk saying that reform needed a new leader as Nigel Farage wasn't up to the job? Zoom in on his face.
I always smile. I'm always a happy man, Jeremy.
What did you make about that?
Well, I mean, it's for reform, really, to discuss their own leadership. I mean, I think what's really important is actually what we've seen here is the only sensible opposition to the current Labour government are the 121 Conservative members of Parliament in Parliament. And I think Elon Musk is waking up to the fact that actually reform isn't all it pretends to be or it's cut out to be.
Do you really believe that? Because whenever I have a Tory MP on, and I'm being straight, you've won your election and that is important. It's a democracy. Every single message in the next 20 minutes will be, do they really realise what an absolute cow's ear they made of the last however many years? That the only reason we have this appalling Labour government is because the British people said, frankly, anything is better than what we had before. That is a massive, massive issue for you and your 120 colleagues to get over, isn't it? To be fair.
Absolutely, and I think it would be nonsense of me to sit here and say that we got everything right over the last 14 years. We got a lot of things right, but I have to say the infighting and the backbiting that went on, certainly in the latter days or latter years of the government, were appalling. And the electorate were absolutely right to give us the kicking that they did. What we've got to do now is demonstrate to them that we have got our act together. We are a great opposition, which I believe we are. We have got some policies and ambitions for this country, and we're exposing Labour for what they are. Because for the next 5 years, the only people who are going to be in government are Labour, and we need people like the 121 Conservative MPs standing up, exposing where they've got it wrong. Let me get it right, because we're going to talk about health. Supporting them where they get it right, because they will get it right on some occasions, but working to ensure that we hold them to account and boot them out in 5 years' time.
As a member of the Health and Social Care Select Committee, Greg, I'm going to try and put this in as honest to terms as possible. Both of my parents are no longer on this earth, right? They both worked all their lives, paid their taxes, chose to send their 2 boys to private school. They lived comfortably, but they didn't have lots of money, contrary to what people might choose to think about, older people. But I've always believed that we should look after the people who have paid their stamp for 50 years, the people who have given something to this country. I find, the winter fuel thing for me will go down as Keir Starmer's poll tax. I don't care what anybody tells me. If your own people are telling you you'll lose 4,000 people to death, and that is a known fact, you are playing with fire electorally. I don't care what any person tells me. But today we find out that this government, this appalling government, has opened the door to scrapping free prescriptions to the over 60s. And I was trying... You're erudite, you're an MP, I'm not, I'm a broadcaster. I was sat here before thinking, how do you describe that? So the only way I can put this in layman's terms to you is, Labour, this government seriously is saying from a health point of view, if we don't freeze you to death, we're going to make it so difficult for you to afford the medicine you need to get better that you're going to end up going back to hospital, which is going to screw the very NHS that apparently Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting are trying to save money on. It is completely and utterly ludicrous, isn't it?
Absolutely. The winter fuel, I agree with you that it's Keir Starmer's poll tax. I think, to be frank, though, I think Rachel Reeves bamboozled him into it. I don't think he had a clue that was going to happen, and I think she doesn't understand the impact of it. And to be frank, whilst I have a lot of respect for Wes Streeting, he, as Health Secretary, should have been standing up and saying, absolutely not, we cannot be doing this, because it will kill thousands of people. Cold kills, it's a fact. Ask any medic. That's what's going to happen. And I raised this point with Wes Streeting at the Health Select Committee just before Christmas. And to be frank, his response was pretty blasé and told us that actually everything was going to be fine. I've got constituents who are literally pennies over the pension credit threshold. There's a woman in my constituency who's looking after her husband with multiple sclerosis. She's choosing now whether to eat and feed her husband or to heat her home, and that is just disgraceful.
And I'll give you something, and you're a Tory MP, right? And I've been really straight with anybody that comes on here. I spent all my life voting for the Tory party, and I voted Reform because I felt so let down. Let me tell you something that you can say in the House of Commons. If you took the foreign aid budget of £13 billion and you cut it by 4.5%, that would pay, Greg, for this savings whilst we freeze pensioners to death. That's how badly thought out that policy is. It's disgraceful.
But the reality, Jeremy, is you don't even need to do that, because actually what we're looking at is this tax will probably, or this cut or removal of this credit, will probably end up costing us more than it saves.
Yeah.
So you don't even need to take tax from somewhere else, though I think we do need to be looking at those kind of things. But the reality is this is actually going to kill people, and it's going to not raise any money whatsoever and probably cost us stuff.
Very quickly, we've talked about that. We've talked about Musk. Foreign criminals, 3 times more likely to be arrested for sexual offences, we find out today, which surely, again, not complimenting your party, they didn't stop the boats. This lot are interested in gangs and it's gone through the roof. I have another theory, interested in your opinion on it. I think we're too soft. I've heard about boats and lorries and all of that. I think we as a society are too attractive to these people. I think if we didn't roll out hotels and money, why do they come from France? Because they get they get a tent. Do you not think, again, bringing it back to pensioners, that we should change our focus? And I hate saying this, and people have a go at me. Shouldn't we be looking after our own first and foremost? Because these people aren't coming from war-torn countries. They're taking the mickey out of the British system, aren't they?
I think your last point is the fundamental one. When I speak to my constituents, I don't meet anybody who tells me they don't want to help the most impoverished in the people who are really suffering from war, famine, abuse, etc. But the reality is there are lots of places in the world that are not as attractive or not as nice places to live as we are. And it's not surprising, therefore, that people want to come here. And we've got to have that conversation, a grown-up conversation with the public and as politicians to say, well, where is that limit? What should we be doing? And how should we be doing it?
What can you bring to our society before you arrive here? Take advantage of services that are stretched so that people in this country don't have them. That's not racist, that's factual. And
no, and I know absolutely, and I know you're critical of the previous government, and I accept a lot of that criticism. But actually, we did put in a lot of measures, or at least attempted to put in a lot of measures that stopped some of this. The problem was the Labour government continually voted against it every time we brought in a sanction. So it's no surprising now that boat numbers are going back up again, that they scrapped the Rwanda scheme. Who knows whether that would work, but we never tried it. And I think that's a real problem.
I think the problem started when Rishi...
No deterrence.
I think the problem started, with respect, when Rishi Sunak got himself the leadership, or the prime ministership, by telling Suella Braverman, I'll have you back and you can do what I believe you should be done. And the minute he gave her the job and got the job, he didn't allow her to do it. And a lot of people feel very strongly about immigration. They really do. Foreign criminals are one thing. Just very quickly as well, if you don't mind me asking you about this other story that's just extraordinary today. The sex abuse inquiry. I mean, everybody knows... they've heard about Oldham, they've heard about Rochdale, they've heard about Rotherham. What's frightening to me, Greg, is that many people from across the country are saying that this has gone on for years. Over the weekend, there were calls for an inquiry. There might or might not be some email saying as far back as 2008, we know who was the Director of Public Prosecutions then, there was an email that said, this is about informed choice. Do you believe, your side of the House, that this could be a monumentally large national cover-up? Because if it is, it's an absolute disgrace. And I'm not targeting a political party. If we're talking about institutionalised corruption and fraud, something needs to be done.
I mean, I think the stories that have come out, we knew about some of them already, and they were investigated through the Ajay inquiry some years back. But that only focused on a number of towns, and the information and the evidence that we've seen over the weekend and the last few days, I think has just been, I mean, appalling. I've got 2 young girls myself, and the idea, this is just absolutely appalling. I don't know whether there's been a mass cover-up. But the only way we're going to know if there's going to be a mass cover-up is to have an independent public inquiry into this. And so that's why I know Kemi Badenoch is calling for it, and I'm supporting that, because, to be frank, that is the only way, I think, that the public are going to have any faith about what's happening, and 2, much more importantly, how we can actually ensure that this never happens again.
But, of course, the argument would be an inquiry should have been announced 5 years ago, 3 years ago. I'm not going to lay everything at your ex-government.
I think there was an inquiry over a certain number of towns, but the evidence that's coming to light over the last few days shows that it's much wider than that, and that's why I think we need a further inquiry to look at that. Because, to be frank, it could well be a national scandal. And we need to be honest with the public, and the public need to have confidence in politicians, in social services, in the police force, in the Crown Prosecution Service, and I don't think they will be unless we have that inquiry.
I'm going to be really honest with you. I've loved having you on the show. First time. Will you come back?
Always love to come back, Jeremy. That'd be great.
Top man. Thank you very much indeed. Greg Stafford, Conservative MP for Farnham and Borden, speaking very honestly there about the past and the future. 40 minutes to 7. This is Talk Drive.
us on and accuse us of being lying and fraudulent
What's
about
happening
our
about
membership
that?
numbers.
Wasn't she asked to apologise?
We got a number of different media channels and journalists in to check the actual database, the back end, proved that we were right, she was completely wrong, and just said, look, we all make mistakes, just apologise, Kemi. She's refused to do that, so Nigel announced over the weekend that we're going to make our own constituency seat a key target at the next general election, just to give Kemi a little bit of something to think about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, my friends. 10 to 7. This is Talk Drive. Jeremy Carr. So for 2 hours and 50 minutes, despite having been really ill and having real problems with my voice, I've tried really hard to make it work. My wire has fallen out. Ryan, in that break, said to me, the producer of this show, you sound like Wheezy in Toy Story 2, the bloke on the shelf or the thing on the shelf next to Woody. Wheezy. That's really nice from a man who asked for oven gloves from his wife. Do you know what I mean? Honestly, what did you buy her? Well, I don't know, I didn't buy anything. 0344 499 1000. Kev O'Sullivan tells us he'll join us in time to chat between now and 7 o'clock. Tell us about his holiday, the old bugger. Tracy's in Northampton. Tracy, you're on Talk Drive. A very good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, darling, and I hope you're well. Well, you're not, but, you know. Anyway,
I'm a lot better than I was, and I don't need my bloody producer to call me Wheezy off Toy Story 2.
No, and you're not. You're doing so well. And do you know what? It's brilliant to have you back.
Thank you. Tell Ryan he's a horrible man.
I think you ought to be on 5 days a week myself, but there you go.
So do I, yeah.
I want to get up on...
I can't. Could you tell Ryan off for being horrible to me, Trace?
Oi, Ryan...
Shut
Get
up.
out.
Yeah, get out.
Donut.
Yeah, you donuts, yeah, donut. You lanky donut. Right, crack on, Trace, what you got?
Right, Keir Starmer, right. Why is the Labour Party seeing what we're seeing? Are they still supporting him in what he's doing? Like the rapes, the cutting the pensioners' rates down for... you know, keeping warm, taking that off him. Now he's on about the prescriptions and all that. Then we've got the Muslims coming in and all that. So we're seeing it all. Why is the Labour support, you know, agreeing with what he's doing?
So let's look at some facts. They don't care, right? This is me being completely honest to you, okay? Hear me out. They don't care about you. They don't care about a lot of people. They have an ideology, whereas some people will bend their policies to particular groups, and I've said in many ways that in my mind we should look after children, and without any shadow of a doubt what's happening, of course, these grooming gangs is appalling.
Absolutely.
I think we should look after pensioners who have worked all their lives and paid money in. This is a political party, a socialist political party that believes in many things. An ideology, the state has to become bigger. They're globalists. They're more interested in the world and Europe than they are. I don't think they're particularly proud of being British. They seem to stick up for the perpetrators rather than the victims. It's always everybody else. I don't have a problem, Trace, in helping anybody who is less fortunate. And I don't care about the do-good, as you say, you don't mean that. I absolutely do mean it. But I still think, really strongly, that this government do not seem to care about the very people in this country who right now need our help. And that, for me, is a real, real issue. And I will tell you this, whether it's 5 years or 3 years, the British people will vote against this because they will realise they've been conned. And that tells you how badly the Tory government were.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I want him out, Keir Starmer. I want him out. I want something big to happen, like come on, a vote of confidence.
Not going to make any difference, mate. Let me tell you something. He got less votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019. That's how disinterested, disenchanted, disenfranchised the British people were after 14 years of Tory rule. That's the whole point. Trace, we love you in Northampton. Thank you so much indeed for coming on, my darling. Let's go to Cheshire. Matt, you're on Talk Drive. A very good evening to you. How are you?
Hi, good evening, Jeremy.
Hello, mate.
You don't sound that bad considering you're ill. I've just been ill, and I probably sound worse than you.
Right, hold on a second. I'm going to play you something I've been waiting all day to play, and Ryan's going to go. It's got the word. I'm going to cut it off before it does that. But this, right, on Christmas Day. Okay, this is what I sent Ryan and Jodie because they actually. Where's my microphone there? They actually said, "Oh, have a happy Christmas, Jez." Are you ready for this? Ready, everybody? This is what I sounded like 2 weeks ago. Oh, there we go. So I managed to cut myself off there. That's how bad I felt. That's how bad I sounded, all right? Just thought I'd share that.
So, well, I hope you have a better New Year than you had Christmas.
Ryan's on the floor because I said, I've just... Sorry, I can't laugh. Right, Matt, crack on, you've got 2 minutes.
I just wanted to compare the resignation of Justin Trudeau to Keir Starmer.
Yep.
If we remember, Trudeau called the truckers and those that supported him the far right.
Yep.
And on the day that he resigns, we have the weasel Starmer comparing anybody that calls for a review into rape gangs the far right.
Of course they do.
So we can say, without any doubt, that Starmer will eventually be on the funeral pyre of globalist leaders, along with Jacinda Ardern, Nicola Sturgeon, Justin Trudeau. His days are numbered. We all hate him, and the sooner the better.
I couldn't agree more. And what I find so confusing, so disappointing, so almost just crazy to me is the politicians do not seem to listen. And if this person, Keir Starmer, thinks that the British people are going to ever accept so much of what he's done, they are badly, badly wrong. Matt in Cheshire, thank you very much indeed. Chris, George, Gary Mitchell, Nats as well, thank you for your messages. So many people. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. I spent the best part of 2.5 weeks in bed. I didn't have a drink. I didn't go out. I didn't have Christmas lunch. It was a disaster. This next guest of ours spent 2 weeks in a very nice place, didn't you?
Barbados.
Why didn't you tell me you were going to my island?
It is your place, isn't it?
Where did you stay?
It's just south of Bridgetown, by this beach where they take the horses swimming every day. It was very, very nice. Thanks very much.
Well.
Thank you very much.
I've had proper flu. Been as ill
you
as
sound terrible. I was listening to you earlier.
But I just played the message that I sent to Ryan on Christmas Day, and I said this illness is a... Anyway, there we go.
Yeah.
Loads going on, mate. Good to see you. Look very well. Happy New Year to you.
And to you, Jeremy. Now, obviously, the big story of the day is this fallout between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage, which we will deal with at great length. But... and I wonder if it's just about Tommy Robinson. It's an interesting dispute. Anyway,
where are you on it?
I think these are difficult days for reform. I think this is difficult.
I was very honest with Richard. I spoke to Richard about it. I think he was absolutely right, Farage, to say no to Tommy Robinson. But Benedict Spence made a point earlier. You've got to be very careful not to become too centrist to get elected and miss out on saying the things that have made you who you are and the reason why people support you. Not far-right policies, but policies that the Tory party abandoned.
I agree, but a lot of people who support reform support Tommy Robinson. That's the difficult area. By denouncing Tommy Robinson, Nigel hasn't done his... I understand his approach, but he hasn't done himself any favours. This is difficult for them.
And also Musk. I mean, you play with fire, you get burned.
Yeah. Exactly right. I'm not sure what his game is. I suspect down the line there'll be a rapprochement that Nigel and Elon will become.
He'll fall out with Trump. Musk's like that. He'll fall out with everybody.
Yeah. But I think the big story of the day is not that. It is the fact that this Prime Minister of ours, how dare he say that anyone who believes there should be a public inquiry into the grooming gang scandal is far right. is climbing aboard the far-right bandwagon. Why is it far-right to want an inquiry into one of the greatest scandals that's happened in this country in modern times? Why is that far-right?
It's not far-right. It's not. It's because he was the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yeah.
And I believe, and I've said it all day, I believe this could be a national scandal that goes much higher than just Jess Phillips and an inquiry. I think this is more than the towns mentioned, and I think this is massive, and I think society has covered this up. They are children. They're not informed choices. They're kids who were raped.
And can I just say, West Streeting, Jess Phillips is a great woman. Not anymore, she isn't. Not anymore, she isn't. She blocked an inquiry, and we know why. It's to save Keir's blushes, because he was the useless DPP when this horror was going on, and also it's